If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 241, The Challenge. The Yule Ball loomed on the horizon, casting a shadow of anticipation and anxiety over Hogwarts. As Harry Potter navigated the bustling corridors, he found himself in an unfamiliar state of indecision. The excited chatter of his fellow students, all discussing their plans for the upcoming event, seemed to follow him everywhere. It appeared everyone had a date, or at least a strategy to secure one, everyone except him. Lost in thought, Harry almost didn't hear the voice calling his name. Harry! Wait up! He turned to see Cedric Diggory jogging to catch up with him, a broad grin on his face. Cedric, Harry nodded in greeting, slowing his pace. How are the preparations for the ball going? Cedric's eyes lit up. Brilliant! Cho and I have been practicing our dance steps. You know, to avoid making complete fools of ourselves during the opening dance. His smile faltered slightly as he noticed Harry's less than enthusiastic expression. Have you found a date yet? Harry sighed, running a hand through his hair. The question he'd been dreading, yet seemed unable to escape. Not yet, he admitted reluctantly. To be honest, I'm not even sure I want to go. It all seems like a distraction from the tournament. Cedric's eyebrows shot up in surprise, his expression a mix of disbelief and concern. But you have to go, Harry. It's tradition for the champions to open the ball. Besides, he added with a conspiratorial wink, it might be fun to let loose a bit. You can't be all serious all the time, can you? Before Harry could formulate a response, a commotion at the end of the corridor caught their attention. A group of Beauxbatons Baton students, led by none other than Fleur Delacour, was making their way towards them. Her silvery hair seemed to shimmer in the torchlight, and her blue eyes were fixed intently on Harry. Harry Potter, Fleur called out as she approached, her accent thick but her voice clear and determined. I've been looking for you. Harry and Cedric exchanged a quick glance before Harry turned back to Fleur. Miss Delacour, he said politely, curiosity evident in his tone. What can I do for you? Fleur's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of frustration coloring her otherwise perfect features. I wish to speak with you. Alone, if possible. Cedric, ever perceptive, took the hint. I'll catch up with you later, Harry, he said, giving the Hogwarts champion a supportive pat on the shoulder before heading off. As Cedric left, Harry noticed the corridor had become suspiciously empty. It seemed Fleur's entourage had dispersed as well, leaving the two champions alone. What did you want to talk about? Harry asked, his curiosity piqued. Fleur took a step closer, her eyes never leaving Harry's. There was something in her gaze that Harry couldn't quite place, a mixture of determination, frustration, and something else, respect, perhaps? Or was it fear? I've been thinking, she began, her voice low and intense, since the first task. How strong are you, truly? Do I have any chance of defeating you? Harry observed Fleur carefully, noting the tension in her posture and the fierce determination in her eyes. He could see that she was not in her usual composed state. It seemed the revelation of his abilities during the first task and later had shaken her determination in defeating him in a duel deeply. I am strong because I have reasons to train harder, Harry replied carefully. You don't need to defeat me to prove yourself, Miss Delacour. You're already far more powerful than most of our peers. Fleur shook her head vehemently, her silvery hair catching the light. Non. I cannot simply accept this. I need to experience your strength firsthand. Harry's eyes narrowed slightly. He could sense where this conversation was heading. What exactly are you suggesting, Miss Delacour? A duel, Fleur said simply, her chin lifting in challenge. Between you and me. To truly understand the gap in strength between us. For a moment, Harry was tempted to laugh. The idea seemed absurd, unnecessary. But as he looked into Fleur's determined eyes, he realized she was deadly serious. I don't see the point, he said carefully. You've seen my strength in the dueling tournament earlier this year. And we're already competing in the Triwizard tournament. Isn't that enough? Fleur shook her head, a strand of silvery hair falling across her face. The tournament tests many things, but not our direct magical ability against each other. I want to know, Harry Potter, if I truly stand a chance against you. Harry considered her words. He had to admit, there was a certain logic to her request. And yet... I'm sorry, Miss Delacour, but I don't think it's a good idea. Sometimes it's better to live with hope than to face a harsh truth. And frankly, I don't see what I have to gain from this duel. A sly smile spread across Fla's face, transforming her expression from one of frustration to one of cunning determination. Perhaps, she said, her voice low and enticing, we need to make it more interesting, non? What if we make a wager? Despite himself, Harry felt a spark of interest ignite within him. The strategic part of his mind, always alert for opportunities, perked up at the suggestion. What kind of wager? He asked, careful to keep his tone neutral. Simple, Fleur said, her eyes glinting with challenge. ZE loser must agree to any one request made by ZE winner. Anything at all. Harry's eyebrows shot up at the boldness of the proposal. Anything at all? He asked, seeking clarification. That's a dangerous offer, Miss Delacour. You could end up being my servant if you lose. Fla's smile didn't waver. Within reason, of course. Nothing illegal or harmful. Just a simple request. Harry took a moment to think it over. The risk seemed minimal, and the potential rewards were tempting. He could potentially gain access to some rare French magic if he won. And losing, well, that wasn't even a consideration in his mind. All right, Harry said finally, his decision made. I accept your challenge, Miss Delacour. When and where shall we have this duel? A triumphant smile spread across Fla's face. Tomorrow night, after curfew. There is a clearing in ZE Forbidden Forest, not far from ZE Edge. We can duel there without being disturbed. Harry nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Very well. Tomorrow night it is. Shall we say, midnight? Midnight, Fleur agreed. She extended her hand, and Harry took it, sealing their agreement with a firm handshake. As Fleur turned to leave, Harry called out, Miss Delacour. She paused, looking back at him over her shoulder. I hope you come prepared to lose. Fla's answering smile was both beautiful and determined, a combination that Harry found oddly compelling. ZE winner has not been decided yet, Monsieur Potter, she said, her voice filled with confidence. May ZE strongest win. As Harry watched her walk away, her head held high and her steps purposeful, he found himself filled with a mix of emotions he couldn't quite untangle. He knew she had no chance of defeating him but couldn't help but feel a growing respect for the Beaux Batons champion's determination. It takes courage to fight when you know the odds are stacked against you. Moreover, Harry couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in Fla's demeanor. The air of superiority she usually carried was less pronounced. There were hints of the Fleur he remembered from the books after the Triwizard Tournament, determined, passionate, and fiercely competitive. He found himself looking forward to witnessing her continued growth and transformation. As he made his way back to the Ravenclaw common room, a small smile played on Harry's lips. The upcoming duel had given him something to focus on, a welcome distraction from the looming social pressures of the Yule Ball. But as he passed groups of students still chattering excitedly about their plans for the dance, he felt his mood dip once again. The smile faded from his face as he realized that, exciting midnight duel notwithstanding, he was no closer to solving his immediate problem. He still had no date for the ball, and time was running out. Chapter 242, A Duel Under the Stars. The Forbidden Forest loomed before Harry, its dark silhouette a stark contrast against the star-studded sky. A cool breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying with it the faint sense of pine and damp earth. As the clock struck midnight, Harry made his way towards the agreed-upon clearing, his footsteps muffled by a simple charm. As he stepped into the moonlit clearing, Harry saw Fleur was already there, her silvery hair gleaming in the pale light. She stood tall and proud, her wand at her side, a picture of determination. For a moment, Harry was struck by how different she looked from the haughty girl he'd first met. There was a fire in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before. Bonsoir, Harry, Fleur greeted him, her voice carrying clearly in the still night air. I was beginning to think you had changed your mind. Harry allowed himself a small smile. And miss an opportunity like this? Not a chance, Miss Delacour. They stood facing each other, the tension in the air palpable. Harry took a moment to survey their surroundings, but his eyes kept drifting back to Fleur. There was something about her tonight, a determination, a vulnerability, that intrigued him. Shall we establish ZE rules? Fleur asked, her wand twirling idly between her fingers. Harry nodded, his eyes never leaving Fla's. Standard dueling rules seem appropriate. No unforgivables or excessively harmful spells. The duel ends when one of us is disarmed or incapacitated. Agreed. We, Fleur confirmed, a hint of anticipation in her voice. And ZE wager stands. ZE loser must grant one request to ZE winner, within reason. Agreed, Harry said, his grip on his wand tightening slightly. Shall we begin? Fleur's answer came in the form of a deep curtsy, which Harry returned with a formal bow. As they straightened, both assumed dueling stances, wands at the ready. For a moment, the clearing was silent save for the whisper of wind through the leaves. Then, with a suddenness that belied her graceful appearance, Fleur struck. Stupefy! She cried, a jet of red light streaking towards Harry. Harry didn't bother with a verbal counter. With a flick of his wand, he conjured a shimmering shield, deflecting Fleur's stunning spell harmlessly into the trees. He followed up with a quick silent expelliarmus of his own, which Fleur dodged with surprising agility. The duel had begun in earnest, and Harry found himself impressed by Fleur's improvement. She was far better than the last time they duelled, where she had been very dependent on her allure to fight. Now she was like a real duelist. She moved with a fluid grace, her spell work precise and powerful. She still used her allure throughout the fight to try to disorient Harry, but unfortunately for her, he was immune. Jets of light crisscrossed the clearing as they traded spells, illuminating the night in a dazzling display of magical prowess. Incarcerus! Fleur called out, conjuring thick ropes that snaked towards Harry. Incendio! Harry countered, setting the ropes ablaze mid-air. He used the momentary distraction to send a leg locker curse at Fleur, which she narrowly avoided with a graceful pirouette. As the duel progressed, Harry began to notice a pattern in Fleur's attacks. She favored fire-based spells, her wand work creating intricate patterns of flame that danced through the air. It was beautiful magic, Harry had to admit, but he could see the strain it was putting on her. Impressive, Miss Delacour, Harry called out as he deflected another fiery assault. But fire isn't going to win you this duel. Fleur's eyes narrowed, a challenge glinting in their depths. Perhaps you would prefer some ice, Zen? Glacis tria. A blast of freezing air rushed towards Harry, frost forming on the grass in its wake. Harry met it with a powerful flame-freezing charm, steam hissing as the two spells collided. As the duel progressed, Harry realized he was holding back more than he had intended. Part of him wanted to end the duel quickly, to demonstrate the full extent of his abilities. But another part, a part he hadn't expected, was enjoying the duel, having fun. This was quite different from the intense duels he had had during training or with other opponents. There was a lightness to it, a joy in the exchange of magic that he hadn't felt in a long time. Fleur, for her part, was beginning to show signs of frustration. Her spells came faster, more aggressively, but with less precision. Why won't you attack properly? She demanded between casts, her accent thickening with exertion. Stop holding back. Harry paused, considering her words. She was right, he wasn't taking the duel as seriously as he could, which was, in a way, disrespectful to his opponent. However, he knew that if he gave it his all, the duel would end in an instant. But maybe that was what Fleur wanted, to truly understand the gap between them. As you wish, he said quietly, and then he moved. What followed was a display of magic that left Fleur breathless. Harry's wand became a blur, spells flowing from it in a continuous stream. The air crackled with energy as Harry channeled his power, drawing on the strength he'd cultivated over years of rigorous training. Thunder rumbled overhead, and lightning began to spark around Harry, slowly converging into the ethereal form of a thunderbird. The magical construct grew larger and more defined with each passing second, its wings spanning the width of the clearing, eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Fleur saw the magic in front of her and knew Harry was way above her ability. But she was not willing to give up just yet and knew she couldn't stand still and had to destroy Harry's spell before it was fully formed. She launched a barrage of spells at the Thunderbird, but each one was absorbed or deflected by the crackling energy surrounding it. Harry watched calmly as his creation took shape, his eyes never leaving Fleur. He could see the determination in her stance, the fierce concentration on her face as she fought against the inevitable. When the Thunderbird was fully formed, Harry sent it towards Fleur with a simple gesture. The air hummed with power as the magical construct surged forward, lightning trailing in its wake. Fleur, her face set in grim determination, cast the strongest shield charm she knew. Protego Maxima! She cried, pouring every ounce of her considerable magical strength into the spell. The Thunderbird collided with Fleur's shield in a blinding flash of light and a deafening crack of thunder. For a moment, the entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, Fleurs' shield collapsed. The Thunderbird hovered mere inches from Fleur, its form crackling with barely contained energy. Fleur stood her ground, chin lifted defiantly, even as she closed her eyes, bracing for the impact she knew was coming. But the impact never came. After a few tense moments, Fleur opened her eyes to find the Thunderbird soaring upwards, dissipating into the night sky in a shower of sparks. "Are you all right, Miss Delacour?" Harry's voice broke the silence, concern evident in his tone. He moved closer to her, suddenly worried he might have gone too far. Fleur turned to face him, her expression a mixture of awe and resignation. "I never stood a chance, did I?" Despite her words, there was no bitterness in her voice, only a quiet acceptance. Harry shook his head, a small, apologetic smile on his face. "I'm afraid not. I've reached a level of strength that surpasses most adult wizards. I suspect I might even be on par with wizards like Dumbledore, though I've never had the chance to test that theory." Fleur's eyes widened at this revelation. I had no idea. You are far more powerful than I imagined. The thought of defeating you looks foolish now." She paused, curiosity overtaking her disappointment. "How did you become so strong?" Harry's expression softened. "I've been training in magic and other disciplines since I was 6 years old. I have a significant head start, and well, I've sacrificed a lot of the normal joys of life to focus on becoming stronger." He found himself opening up more than he intended. There was something about Fleur's earnest curiosity that made him want to share. "But don't be discouraged," he added hastily. "You're an excellent duelist, Miss Delacour. Your spell work is both powerful and beautiful. The way you've improved since our last duel is impressive." Fleur's cheeks colored slightly at the compliment. "Merci, Harry. But still, you could have ended that duel at any time, couldn't you?" Harry shrugged, neither confirming nor denying. "A duel isn't just about raw power. Your technique is impressive, and you pushed me more than you might think. I actually enjoyed myself tonight." They stood there for a moment, the adrenaline of the duel slowly fading, replaced by a comfortable silence. Finally, Fleur straightened, her pride reasserting itself. "Well, Monsieur Potter, it seems you have won our wager. What is your request?" Harry blinked, having almost forgotten about the terms of their duel. "Oh, right. The request." He paused, considering. He could see a hint of apprehension in Fleur's eyes, and he realized she was probably expecting him to ask for something outrageous or embarrassing. At that moment, looking at Fleur's mix of pride and vulnerability, Harry made a decision. "My request is, that you forget about the request. Let's just say we had a good duel and leave it at that." Fleur's eyes widened in surprise. "But, you won. You have the right to ask anything of me." Harry shook his head, smiling. "I don't need to. This duel was enlightening enough on its own, and besides, I had a good time spending this lovely night dueling with you." Fleur's expression shifted, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "However, it does not sit well with me. I made a wager, and I lost. I cannot in good conscience let the matter rest without honoring my word." Harry started to protest, but Fleur held up a hand, silencing him. "Non, Harry. It is a matter of pride, of honor. You won fairly, and you deserve to claim your prize." She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "So, I ask you again, what is your request?" Harry found himself at a loss for words. He had earlier considered asking for some rare French magic, but the idea now seemed childish, and he was embarrassed to voice it. As he looked at her, standing there with a mix of pride and apprehension, an idea suddenly struck him. It was impulsive, perhaps even foolish, but in that moment, it felt right. "All right," he said slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "If you insist, I do have a request." Fleur tensed slightly but nodded for him to continue. "Be my date for the Yule Ball," Harry said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess himself. "And teach me how to dance." For a moment, Fleur simply stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise. Of all the things she might have expected him to ask, this clearly wasn't one of them. Then, to Harry's amazement, a laugh bubbled up from her throat, bright and genuine. "Of all the things you could have asked for, you want dance lessons?" Fleur said, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Harry felt a flush creeping up his neck, but he stood his ground. Well, as a champion, I'm expected to open the ball with a dance. And frankly, I'm rubbish at it. I figured, who better to teach me than someone as graceful as you? Fla's laughter subsided, but a warm smile remained on her face. And the part about being your date? Is that also because of your lack of dancing skills? Now it was Harry's turn to laugh, the sound echoing through the clearing. As I mentioned earlier, I've been so focused on becoming stronger that I'm not good at relationships. I had fun tonight. I feel like I understand you better, and I'd like to get to know you more. If you're willing, of course. Fleur regarded him thoughtfully for a long moment, her blue eyes searching his face. Harry found himself holding his breath, suddenly realizing how much he wanted her to say yes. Very well, Harry, she said softly. I accept your request. I will be your date for the Yule Ball, and I will teach you to dance. Her eyes sparkled mischievously as she added, Zuff, I warn you, I am a very demanding teacher. Harry grinned, feeling a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying lift from his shoulders. I wouldn't expect anything less. Fla's expression turned playful. You decide the place for our lessons, Harry. Also, she added, a conspiratorial note entering her voice, I want to keep this agreement a secret till the ball. It will be interesting to see everyone's expressions. Harry nodded, already imagining the shocked faces of their fellow students. Agreed. It'll be our little secret. With a final agreement to meet the next evening, Fleur bid him good night and made her way towards the Beauxbatons carriage, her silvery hair shimmering in the moonlight. Harry stood in the clearing, watching her leave, a mix of emotions swirling within him. As he turned to make his own way back to the castle, Harry couldn't help but feel that something significant had shifted tonight. In coming to understand Fleur better, he'd also gained a new perspective on himself. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, Harry felt a spark of excitement for the future. And for once, that excitement had nothing to do with power or training. With a small smile playing on his lips, Harry disappeared into the shadows of the Forbidden Forest, his mind already turning to thoughts of dance lessons and the surprising turn his life had taken. Chapter 243, Secret Lessons and New Steps. The morning after his moonlit duel with Fleur dawned bright and clear, marking the last day of term at Hogwarts. Students bustled about the castle, trunks in tow, eagerly discussing their holiday plans. The Great Hall buzzed with chatter during breakfast, a mix of farewells and anticipation for the upcoming Yule Ball. Harry sat at the Ravenclaw table, picking at his breakfast as he half-listened to his friend's conversation. Roger was in the middle of describing his elaborate plans to woo his Beauxbatons date. Harry, still processing the events of the previous night, found himself at a loss. He had no idea what had compelled him to ask Fleur to be his date, and he was even more surprised that she had accepted. Subconsciously, he found himself scanning the other side of the Ravenclaw table for a glimpse of silvery blonde hair. As if sensing his gaze, Fleur looked up from the Beauxbatons table. Their eyes met across the crowded hall, and she gave him a small, secret smile. Harry felt a flutter in his stomach that had nothing to do with the bacon on his plate. Earth to Harry, Roger Davies said, waving a hand in front of his face. You still haven't told us who you're taking to the ball. You have sorted your date situation, right? Harry blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Oh, I'm working on it, he said vaguely, reaching for his pumpkin juice. Cedric, who had wandered over from the Hufflepuff table, raised an eyebrow. Working on it? Harry, the ball is in a week. Don't tell me the Hogwarts champion is going stag. Harry shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. I've got it under control. You'll just have to wait and see. His friends exchanged skeptical glances but seemed to accept his evasion. As the conversation moved on to other topics, Harry felt relief. He didn't think he could hide anything from his friends if they pressed, especially the girls. As breakfast wound down, students began filing out of the Great Hall, many heading towards the Hogwarts Express. Harry lingered, waiting for an opportunity to send a message to Fleur. He quickly scribbled a note containing the location he had prepared for their dance lessons. It wasn't the room of requirement, but an empty classroom he had modified. The room of requirement was his secret place, and he wasn't ready to share it with anyone yet. Harry spotted Fleur leaving with her Beauxbatons classmates and discreetly slipped the parchment into her hand as he passed by their group. Fleur's fingers closed around the note, and she gave an almost imperceptible nod. Harry continued on his way, his heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. He had no idea why he was so nervous about mere dance lessons. The source of Harry's bewilderment lay in the peculiar nature of his reincarnation. When he had unlocked his past life's memories that fateful night, he had gained a wealth of knowledge and general life experiences. However, the intimate memories of relationships and family had been conspicuously absent. It was as if those personal, emotional experiences had been carefully excised, leaving him with practical knowledge but no guidance when it came to matters of the heart. This peculiar situation left Harry in a unique position. While he had the mental maturity and knowledge of someone far beyond his years, his heart remained that of a teenager, untutored in the subtle dance of emotions and relationships. Harry's single-minded focus on training and self-improvement in this life, coupled with the emotional scars from his early years, had further isolated him from the typical teenage social interactions. After leaving the Great Hall, Harry watched the students leaving for the Hogwarts Express with a twinge of longing. He'd initially planned to spend the holidays exploring Potter Manor, delving into his family's history and perhaps uncovering some long-forgotten magic. But the Yule Ball, coupled with his upcoming dance lessons, had forced him to change his plans. He recalled his recent conversation with Sirius through the two-way mirror. "You sure you don't want to come home for the holidays, Harry?" Sirius had asked. "Aries has been asking about you. I think he misses causing some trouble with his big brother." Harry had laughed but shook his head. "Thanks, Sirius, but I've got to stay. You know, being the champion and attending the Yule Ball. Maybe I'll secretly come after the ball. Have some work to do." Sirius grinned. "Good. Speaking of the Yule Ball, got yourself a date yet?" Harry felt his cheeks warm. I'm working on it," he mumbled. "Working on it?" Sirius barked a laugh. "Blame me. I forgot to give you some special lessons with all the other training." Harry protested, "I don't need any lessons. I have got a date. However, it is a secret." Sirius's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Keeping secrets about dates? Oh, this takes me back. You know, in my 5th year, there was this Yuletide dance and James and I—" "Sirius," Harry interrupted, his face now burning, "I really don't need to hear about your Hogwarts conquests." But Sirius was on a roll. "Conquests? Ha! If only. No, what happened was, James and I decided to—" "I'm warning you, Sirius," Harry said, a glint in his eye. "One more word and I'm telling Amelia about the time you tried to charm her to sing love sonnets and ended up giving the entire DMLE hiccups for a week." Sirius's face paled comically. "You wouldn't dare." Harry raised an eyebrow. "Try me." There was a moment of silence before both burst into laughter. All right, Sirius conceded, wiping a tear from his eye. "I'll spare you the details. But seriously, Harry, if you need any advice—" "Thanks, Sirius," Harry said, smiling fondly at his godfather. "But I think I've got it handled." The rest of the day passed in a blur. The castle was a little empty with the juniors mostly gone, so everyone was having some fun now that classes were over and they had loads of free time. As evening approached, Harry left the group with a training excuse and made his way to the unused classroom he had prepared for their dance lessons. He paced nervously, wondering if Fleur had understood his hastily scrawled directions. Just as he was beginning to worry, there was a soft knock at the door. Fleur entered, her silver blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore a light blue dress that flowed around her as she moved. "Bonsoir, Harry," she said with a smile. "I see you have found us a suitable practice room." Harry nodded, suddenly feeling tongue-tied. I hope it's okay. I've set up some privacy wards, so we won't be disturbed and we can keep this a secret till the Yule Ball." Fleur's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Privacy wards? My, Harry, what exactly did you have in mind for these lessons?" Harry felt his face heat up. "No. I didn't mean. I just thought." Fleur laughed, a melodious sound that echoed in the empty classroom. "Relax, Harry. I am only teasing you. Now, shall we begin?" She held out her hand, and Harry hesitated for a moment before taking it. As they moved into the starting position for a waltz, Harry felt acutely aware of how close they were standing. "You seem nervous, Harry," Fleur observed, a hint of playfulness in her voice. "Is this the same Harry Potter who faced me in a duel just last night? The one who tamed a Horntail?" Surely a little dance cannot be more frightening than that. Harry chuckled, some of his tension easing. Dragons and duels I can handle. I have trained my whole life for it. Dancing, well, that's a challenge since I am completely clueless. Well then, Fleur said, her tone becoming more businesslike, let us approach this like one of your training sessions. First, the basics. The waltz is in 3/4 time. 1 2 3, 1 2 3. Let's start with the box step. As they began to move, Harry found himself struggling to coordinate his feet. He was acutely aware of Fleur's hand in his, the warmth of her palm against his shoulder. More than once, he stepped on her toes, mumbling apologies. Harry, Fleur said after a particularly clumsy turn, you are thinking too much. Dancing is not about perfect technique, it is about feeling the music, moving with your partner. Try to relax. Harry nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. He was acutely aware of how unprepared he was for this situation. It was a humbling realization that there were still areas of life where he had much to learn, regardless of his otherworldly knowledge or magical prowess. They began with a simple box step, Fleur counting out the rhythm as they moved. Harry's brow furrowed in concentration, his eyes fixed on his feet. Look at me, not your feet, Fleur instructed gently. Trust yourself to move correctly. Harry lifted his gaze, meeting Fleur's eyes. He was surprised to find warmth and encouragement there, rather than the teasing he'd half expected. As they continued, Harry's movements gradually became smoother. His training in swordsmanship had given him a good sense of balance and footwork, which translated well to dancing. Much better, Fleur encouraged. Now, let's try a simple turn. As they attempted the new move, Harry stumbled, nearly falling. Without thinking, he tightened his grip on Fleur to steady himself, pulling her closer. For a moment, they stood chest to chest, their faces inches apart. Harry could see flecks of gold in Fleur's blue eyes, and could feel the warmth of her breath on his cheek. Well, Fleur said softly, a slight flush coloring her cheeks, that was, not quite the turn I had in mind. Harry quickly stepped back, mumbling another apology. But as he met Fleur's eyes, he saw no judgment there, only a warm amusement. You are too stiff, Fleur commented, amusement coloring her voice. Are you afraid I will bite? Harry felt his cheeks heat up. No, I'm just not used to this kind of proximity. It must be lonely, Fleur said softly, to always be training, always preparing for some future threat. I cannot fathom giving up the joys of life for training. Harry replied, I suppose it is lonely sometimes. But it's necessary when you are part of a family who has a Dark Lord and his followers on his back. Fleur's expression softened. Perhaps. But life is all about living, about experiencing joy and connection. You need not be alone in your battle against the dark, Harry. Harry smiled wryly. Maybe, but that's me, I guess. I can take all the worries so that my family can live the good life. That's very knightly of you, Fleur said, a note of admiration in her voice. As their conversation flowed, Harry felt himself relaxing. When they returned to dancing, he found it easier to move with Fleur, to follow her lead without overthinking every step. By the end of their first lesson, Harry had mastered the basic waltz step and was beginning to understand the rhythm of the dance. You have made good progress, Harry, Fleur said, looking pleased. With a few more lessons, you will be ready to impress everyone at the ball. As they gathered their things to leave, Harry found himself reluctant for the evening to end. Thank you, Fleur, he said sincerely. For doing this, I mean. I know it's not how you plan to spend your evenings. Fleur smiled, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. It is my pleasure, Harry. Besides, she added with a wink, it is not every day one gets to see the great Harry Potter so, flustered. Harry laughed, feeling more at ease than he had all evening. Well, I'm glad I could provide some entertainment. Same time tomorrow. Oui, Fleur agreed. And Harry? Try not to worry so much. You are doing fine. As they parted ways in the corridor, Harry couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation for their next lesson. Despite his initial nervousness, he found himself looking forward to spending more time with Fleur. There was something about her wit, her patience, the way she behaved that intrigued him. Walking back to Ravenclaw Tower, Harry reflected on how much had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, he had been dreading the Yule Ball. Now, he found himself eagerly anticipating it. As he crawled into bed that night, his dreams were filled with swirling blue dresses and the faint scent of flowers. Chapter 244, The Golden Egg. The week leading up to the Yule Ball transformed Hogwarts into a hive of excited activity. Amidst the flurry of preparations, Harry found himself living a double life. By day, he maintained his usual regimen of rigorous training and study, deftly deflecting his friends' increasingly curious inquiries about his mysterious dance partner. As night fell, he would slip away to a hidden classroom where Fleur awaited, their clandestine dance lessons evolving into a nightly adventure that Harry found himself increasingly anticipating. Despite the mounting excitement surrounding the approaching ball, Harry's friends hadn't forgotten about the enigmatic golden egg from the first task. Reggie, in particular, had thrown himself into unraveling its mystery with a fervor that only a true Ravenclaw could muster. It was on a crisp evening, just 3 days before the ball, that Reggie burst into their usual gathering spot, his face flushed with the exhilaration of discovery. His sudden entrance startled the group, who had been lazily discussing their plans for the upcoming ball. "I've got it!" he exclaimed breathlessly, practically falling onto the bench next to Harry. "I've cracked the egg's secret!" Harry's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. "Already? Have you been spending all your time on this? You do realize we have months before the second task, right?" Roger, looking slightly put out, chimed in, "Yet. I thought we were going to tackle this together after the Yule Ball. I've been up to my ears in dance preparations." He turned to Arabella with an accusatory glance. "Didn't you try to stop him?" Arabella sighed, a mix of exasperation and fondness in her voice. "Believe me, I tried. But you know how he gets when he sinks his teeth into a problem. It's like trying to separate a niffler from a pile of gold. We haven't even had a chance to practice our dance steps because of it." Reggie had the grace to look sheepish. "Sorry, Bella. It's just, once I got close to figuring it out, I couldn't let it go. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch." Arabella's expression softened. "All right, you great big bookworm. I forgive you. Now, let's hear about this earth-shattering discovery of yours. What's the secret behind that awful screeching?" Harry, his eyes twinkling with amusement, decided to have a bit of fun. "Thanks for all your hard work, Reggie. So, should I conjure a bucket of water, or shall we all take a refreshing dip in the Great Lake?" Reggie's jaw dropped. "You knew? But, how? When?" Harry tapped the side of his head, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "The Sorting Hat didn't put me with the claws just for my dashing good looks, you know. But don't let me spoil your moment. Go on, enlighten everyone else." Reggie deflated slightly, but his excitement quickly resurged. "Well, Harry, you may have taken some wind out of my sails, but I'm not done yet. Ever since I heard that horrible screaming, something about it nagged at me. It felt familiar, like I'd read about it somewhere. So, I dove back into my notes, practically lived in the library for a few days, and voila! The answer revealed itself." He paused dramatically, clearly savoring the moment. "The wailing sound? It's actually mer people singing. To human ears, it's incomprehensible above water. But submerge it, and suddenly, it all becomes clear." Cedric leaned forward, his eyes alight with curiosity. "So what's next?" "We just dunk the egg in water and open it. Harry, we've got to try this out." Harry's eyes lit up with an idea. "Simply dunking it in a bucket seems a bit anticlimactic, don't you think? Why don't we make an event of it? We could have a picnic by the lake and listen to the egg together. It's not like we have classes to worry about." The suggestion was met with a chorus of enthusiastic agreement. Within the hour, they had assembled a veritable feast from the kitchens, with heartfelt thanks to the ever-obliging house elves, gathered an assortment of warm blankets, and of course, retrieved the golden egg. As they made their way down to the lake, their breath visible in the crisp winter air, there was a palpable sense of excitement among them. They found a secluded spot by the water's edge, sheltered from the biting wind by a cluster of ancient trees. Soon, warm blankets were spread out, and a tempting array of sandwiches, fresh fruit, and steaming mugs of hot chocolate appeared. "All right, Reggie," Harry said, holding up the egg with a flourish. "Care to do the honors?" Reggie nodded, his eyes shining with anticipation. He took the egg and waded into the shallows of the lake, visibly shivering as the icy water lapped at his legs. With a deep breath and a determined set to his jaw, he submerged both the egg and his head under water. The group waited with bated breath, the only sound the gentle lapping of water against the shore. After what seemed like an eternity, Reggie emerged, sputtering and shivering but with a triumphant grin splitting his face. "I was right!" he exclaimed through chattering teeth. "It's a song. Something about taking what you'll miss and having an hour to find it." Intrigued, the group decided to experience the underwater melody for themselves. They waded into the shallows, wincing at the cold, and submerged their heads along with the egg. The haunting voices of the mer people filled their ears. "Come seek us where our voices sound. We cannot sing above the ground. And while you're searching ponder this. We've taken what you'll sorely miss. An hour long you'll have to look. And to recover what we took. But past an hour the prospect's black. Too late, it's gone, it won't come back." Emerging from the water, they hurried back to their blankets, where Harry deftly cast drying and warming charms on everyone. As they huddled together, sipping hot chocolate, the discussion of the clue began in earnest. Cedric frowned thoughtfully. "So, something precious to Harry will be hidden underwater, and he has to find it within an hour? In this massive lake?" Reggie nodded, his brow furrowed. "That's the gist of it. But what could this precious thing be? A cherished item, perhaps?" Angelina shook her head decisively. "That can't be right. I don't think any professor would dare try to steal something from Harry. They'd have better luck breaking into Gringotts." Harry chuckled, a hint of pride in his voice. "You know me well. The wards on my trunk would give even Dumbledore a run for his money." Elvinia offered another suggestion. "Maybe it's not a personal item. Could it be another clue, like the golden egg? Something precious for the next task?" Roger disagreed, shaking his head. "Nah, that doesn't fit. Where's the urgency in that? The task would be a real snooze fest." Harry nodded, his expression turning serious. "Roger's onto something. I have a feeling it's not an object at all. I think it might be a person." Arabella's eyes widened in shock. "What? A person? You mean they'd keep someone underwater for Merlin knows how long, waiting to be rescued? That's absolutely mental." Harry shrugged, a wry smile on his face. "Welcome to the Triwizard Tournament. According to my research, the organizers aren't exactly sticklers for safety protocols." Reggie's eyes lit up with renewed curiosity. "So a person then? Who will it be? Someone from outside or inside? From the Black family?" Harry chuckled, shaking his head. "I would love to see them try and face the wrath of Arcturus, Sirius, and Amelia." Cedric nodded in agreement, a look of mock terror on his face. "No one would like to go against that force. So Susan is out, and since Harry doesn't even have a girlfriend, maybe it will be one of us." Harry's eyes twinkled mischievously. "I hope it's one of the girls because if it's one of you boys, I'm not saving you. I'll leave you in the Great Lake and save someone else's hostage." Roger's jaw dropped in mock indignation. "Harry, you wouldn't really do that, right?" Harry shrugged, maintaining his playful demeanor. "Maybe. It'll depend on who the other hostages are. If all are boys, I might save you to win the task. So if the organizers or professors come to you to participate in the task, do your best to decline." Reggie nodded vigorously, wrapping his arms around himself as if already feeling the chill. "Will do. I hate the cold and do not want to be inside the lake." The group laughed, the tension of the earlier discussion breaking. As their laughter subsided, the conversation shifted to more practical matters. Ideas for underwater breathing, navigation, and combat flew thick and fast. Each friend seemed eager to contribute, offering suggestions that ranged from the practical to the outlandish. Harry listened attentively to each idea, genuinely appreciating his friend's enthusiasm and creativity. Though he already had the beginnings of a plan forming in his mind, he found himself impressed by some of their suggestions. He made mental notes to investigate a few of the more promising ideas further. As the afternoon waned, their conversation drifted from the egg's clue to lighter topics. The approaching Yule Ball was a particular favorite, with everyone speculating about dates and dance moves. "Speaking of dates," Cedric said, turning to Harry with a mischievous glint in his eye, "you still haven't spilled the beans about who you're taking, Harry. Care to share with your dear friends?" Harry laughed, shaking his head. "Nice try," said. "But you'll just have to wait and see like everyone else." Roger adopted an exaggerated look of fear. "I'm starting to worry, Harry. You're not going to shock us all by showing up with some magically conjured partner, are you?" Harry grinned, enjoying the banter. Now there's an idea, Roger. Wish I'd thought of that earlier. But no, I assure you, my date is very real. And trust me, the surprise will be worth the wait. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, the group reluctantly packed up their picnic. It had been a day well spent, but with the Yule Ball looming on the horizon, there was still much to be done. As they made their way back to the castle, Harry felt a sense of satisfaction. The afternoon spent with friends had been a pleasant change of pace from his usual routine. These moments of camaraderie and shared laughter, he realized, added a different kind of strength to his arsenal. With a smile playing on his lips, Harry entered the castle, his mind already turning to thoughts of the upcoming ball and the secret dance lessons that awaited him that evening. Chapter 245, Prelude to a Dance. As dawn broke on the day of the Yule Ball, Hogwarts Castle seemed to awaken with a collective breath of anticipation. The usual Christmas decorations had undergone a magical metamorphosis overnight. Icicles sang carols in perfect harmony, their crystalline voices echoing through the corridors. Enchanted mistletoe giggled and blushed when couples walked underneath, causing equal parts amusement and embarrassment. The very air sparkled with magic and excitement, as if the castle itself was eagerly awaiting the evening's festivities. Harry woke early, his mind already whirling with thoughts of the night ahead. As he lay in bed, staring at the intricate patterns on his canopy, he found himself unconsciously running through dance steps. Despite the intensive training sessions with Fleur and his newfound proficiency, a tendril of nervousness curled in his stomach. The thought of tripping or stumbling in front of the entire school was enough to make even the seasoned warrior in him break out in a cold sweat. He'd even had a few nightmares about it. One particularly vivid dream featured him on the front page of the Daily Prophet, the headline blaring, "Champion Dueler gets wobbly feet and trips during Yule Ball." He'd woken from that one in a cold sweat, much to his chagrin. Harry chuckled to himself, realizing how absurd it was that he, who had faced dark wizards and dangerous creatures, was nervous about a dance. Shaking off the lingering unease, Harry made his way down to the Great Hall for breakfast. The atmosphere was electric, a far cry from the usual morning grumbles and sleepy faces. Students chattered animatedly, their excitement palpable. Even the ghosts seemed more lively than usual, with Peeves zooming around singing rude variations of Christmas carols, much to Filch's obvious displeasure. "Scrub the halls with Filch's old trousers, fa la 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 la, la 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 la." Peeves cackled as he zoomed past, narrowly avoiding a swipe from the caretaker's mop. Harry ate quickly, his eyes scanning the hall for familiar faces. His friends were similarly occupied, and he caught only fleeting glimpses of them throughout the morning. The Beauxbatons students, including Fleur, were nowhere to be seen, likely engaged in their own mysterious preparations. As he finished his toast, an owl swooped down, delivering a small package. Inside, Harry found his new customized dress robes, ordered to match Fleur's outfit. The fabric was sleek black with silver accents that seemed to shimmer like starlight when he moved. It was more extravagant than anything he'd ever worn before, but he had to admit, it looked impressive. He ran his fingers over the material, marveling at its softness and the intricate embroidery. The rest of the day passed in a blur of last-minute preparations. The castle buzzed with activity, from students practicing dance steps in corridors to professors adding final touches to the Great Hall's decorations. Harry spent some time polishing his wand and checking over his various hidden magical items. Old habits die hard, after all. He couldn't help but smile at the irony of preparing for a ball the same way he'd prepare for a duel. As afternoon turned to evening, the excitement in the castle reached a fever pitch. The giggles and excited chatter of girls getting ready echoed through the corridors. Even the usually composed Ravenclaws had caught the festive spirit, with heated debates about the best charm for keeping hair in place replacing the usual academic discussions in the common room. "I'm telling you, the Capilla Stabilis charm is far superior to the Crinus Muto," one boy argued passionately. "But the Crinus Muto allows for mid-evening style changes," another countered. Harry chuckled to himself as he passed by, marveling at how even hairstyling could become an academic debate among Ravenclaws. He took his time getting ready, paying more attention to his appearance than he ever had before. He ensured no wrinkles were present on his robes and carefully styled his hair. As he worked, he couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. A few weeks ago, he would have scoffed at the idea of spending so much time on his appearance. Now, he found himself actually enjoying the process, looking forward to seeing Fleur's reaction. Just as he was adjusting his robes one last time, a tapping at the window caught his attention. An elegant owl perched on the sill, a small package tied to its leg. Curious, Harry let it in. The package contained a small, exquisitely crafted silver pin in the shape of a fleur-de-lis. A note accompanied it. For luck, Monday champion. I look forward to our dance. F. The gesture touched Harry more than he expected, adding a warmth to his excitement as he carefully pinned the ornament to his robes. Harry's and Fla's relationship had grown during this week of nightly dance sessions. From rivals to friends and to something more, they had traversed a path neither had anticipated. The barrier had not been breached yet, but there were signs. Both were comfortable in each other's company, sharing jokes and quiet moments that hinted at deeper feelings. With a final glance in the mirror, Harry stepped out of the dormitory. In the common room, he found Roger, Reggie, and several other Ravenclaw boys waiting, all dressed in their finest. About time, Harry. Roger called out, adjusting his deep purple robes. We were about to send a search party. Or worse, ask Luna to look for Nargles around your bed. The boys laughed, the joke easing some of the nervous tension in the air. As they made their way through the castle, they met up with Cedric and a group of Hufflepuff boys. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of excitement and nerves, everyone trying to act more confident than they felt. So, Harry, Cedric said with a grin as they descended the stairs, are we finally going to find out who your mystery date is? The suspense is killing us, you know. Harry smirked, enjoying his friend's curiosity. You'll see soon enough. Patience is a virtue, said. Besides, good things come to those who wait. They reached the entrance hall, already bustling with students. The boys gathered in a corner, straightening each other's robes and offering last-minute advice. Remember, Reggie was saying, his voice carrying a hint of nervousness despite his confident words, lead with confidence, even if you forget the steps. It's all about the attitude. Roger, looking slightly pale, nodded. Right. Confidence. I can do that. As more students filed in, the entrance hall became a kaleidoscope of colors and fabrics. Harry watched as the girls descended the stairs, each one a vision in their carefully chosen gowns. He saw Susan, looking radiant in gold, her arm linked with a nervous but proud Neville. Hermione made her entrance, and Harry had to do a double take. She looked stunning, her usual bushy hair sleek and shiny, her periwinkle blue robes floating around her. There's Cho, Cedric murmured, his eyes fixed on the stairs. Merlin, she looks beautiful. Harry nodded in agreement, but his eyes were scanning the crowd, looking for one particular face. One by one, his friends' dates arrived, and they peeled off from the group with nervous smiles and whispered good lucks. Soon, Harry found himself alone, still waiting. Just as he was beginning to wonder if something had gone wrong, a hush fell over the entrance hall. Harry looked up, and his breath caught in his throat. At the top of the stairs stood Fleur, a vision in shimmering silver-grey robes that seemed to float around her like mist. Her silvery hair was swept up in an elegant style, with a few loose tendrils framing her face. As she began to descend, all eyes in the hall were drawn to her, expressions ranging from awe to envy. Harry stood transfixed, barely aware of the whispers and gasps around him. In that moment, all his nervousness about dancing and public scrutiny faded away. There was only Fleur, moving towards him with grace and poise, a small smile playing on her lips. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, their eyes met, and Harry felt a jolt of electricity run through him. The night was just beginning, and already it promised to be unforgettable. Chapter 246, The Yule Ball. As Fleur descended the stairs, the hushed silence in the entrance hall gave way to a wave of whispers and gasps. All eyes darted between her and Harry, realization dawning that they were each other's date for the ball. Harry, momentarily stunned by Fla's ethereal beauty, quickly regained his composure. He stepped forward, a smile playing on his lips, his hand reaching into his pocket. You look absolutely breathtaking, he said softly, loud enough only for her to hear. Then, with a flourish that would have made Sirius proud, he produced a small, exquisitely crafted silver bracelet. A token of appreciation for my beautiful date, Harry said, his voice warm with affection. Fla's eyes widened in surprise and delight. Oh, Harry, she breathed, extending her wrist. It's beautiful. Merci beaucoup. As Harry fastened the bracelet around her wrist, their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them faded away. Fla's eyes sparkled as she took his arm. As they turned to face the crowd, Harry caught sight of his friend's reactions. Cedric's jaw had dropped, Roger was grinning from ear to ear, and Reggie looked like he might faint from excitement. The girls around them were a mix of surprise, admiration, and in some cases, poorly concealed jealousy. Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the chatter. "Champions, over here please." She was ushering the tournament champions and their partners to one side. They were to enter the Great Hall in procession when the rest of the students had sat down. Harry and Fleur joined the other champions and their dates. Victor Crumb was accompanied by a beaming Hermione Granger. Charles Potter, the fourth champion, was partnered with Ginny Weasley. Both looked nervous but excited. Harry and Fleur's pairing reduced the number of champion pairs from 4 to 3. The unexpected coupling between the two school champions elicited varied reactions from the professors. Beauxbaton's professor's eyebrows had practically disappeared into her hairline, while Professor Sprout was whispering furiously to Professor Flitwick, who looked both surprised and oddly proud. Professor McGonagall approached Harry and Fleur, her lips pursed in a way that Harry had learned could mean either disapproval or suppressed amusement. "Mr. Potter, Miss Delacour," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "This is unexpected. I was expecting 4 pairs for the opening act." Harry, feeling mischievous, replied with a straight face, "Just doing our part for international magical cooperation, Professor. Isn't that what the tournament is all about?" McGonagall's eyes narrowed slightly, but Harry could swear he saw the corner of her mouth twitch. "Indeed, Mr. Potter. Though I doubt this is quite what the Ministry had in mind when they spoke of fostering inter-school relationships." Fleur, catching on to the play, added with a demure smile, "But surely, Professor, this is the best way to bridge the gap between our schools, non?" For a moment, McGonagall looked like she was fighting back a laugh. Finally, she shook her head, a small smile breaking through her stern demeanor. "Very well. I suppose we can't fault your commitment to the spirit of the tournament. Just, do try to keep the international cooperation to a respectable level, if you please." As McGonagall moved away to organize the procession, Harry could have sworn he heard her mutter, "Albus is going to love this," under her breath. Once everyone else was settled in the hall, Professor McGonagall instructed the champions and their partners to get in line in pairs and follow her. As they entered the Great Hall, applause erupted, and they began walking toward a large round table at the top of the hall where the judges were sitting. The Great Hall's transformation momentarily dazzled both Harry and Fleur. Sparkling silver frost covered the walls, with garlands of mistletoe and ivy crisscrossing the starry black ceiling. The house tables had vanished, replaced by smaller, lantern-lit ones seating about a dozen people each. The overall effect was nothing short of magical, and Fleur's impression of Hogwarts visibly improved. Dumbledore smiled happily as the champions approached the top table, his eyes twinkling with undisguised amusement, though even he seemed a little caught off guard by the odd pairing. Karkaroff wore an expression of intense dislike as he watched Crumb and Hermione draw nearer. Madame Maxime looked shocked, unsure how to react to Fleur's choice of partner. Ludo Bagman, resplendent in robes of bright purple with large yellow stars, was clapping enthusiastically, clearly there just to have fun. As they took their seats, Harry couldn't help but notice the varying reactions around the hall. Some girls were looking at Fleur with undisguised envy, while many boys seemed to be in a state of shock, their eyes darting between Harry and Fleur as if trying to solve a particularly complex puzzle. The dinner passed in a blur. With the other champion pairs including Hermione and Charles, Harry mostly conversed with Fleur and occasionally with Crumb. Fleur, however, was having a delightful time teasing the younger ones, enjoying their blushes at her simplest compliments. Meanwhile, Harry found himself relaxing. He noticed the disguised Crouch was present, still drinking from his flask at intervals. Despite his apprehensions about Crouch and Voldemort's plans, Harry paid no thought to him. He had decided to focus on making this night memorable. When all the food had been consumed, Dumbledore stood up and asked the students to do the same. Then, with a wave of his wand, all the tables zoomed back along the walls leaving the floor clear, and then he conjured a raised platform into existence along the right wall. A set of drums, several guitars, a lute, a cello, and some bagpipes were set upon it. The Weird Sisters, a popular wizarding band, trooped up onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. They picked up their instruments, and as the lights in the hall dimmed, Harry knew it was time for the opening dance. "Ready?" he asked Fleur, standing and offering his hand, a mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through him. Fleur took it, her smile radiant, the bracelet on her wrist catching the light. "Yes. Let's show everyone the results of our practice." The champions and their partners made their way onto the brightly lit dance floor. The Weird Sisters struck up a slow, melodious tune, and Harry placed his hand on Fla's waist, taking her other hand in his. As they began to move to the music, all of Harry's practice with Fleur came flooding back. His steps were sure, his movements fluid. He guided Fleur across the dance floor with a grace that surprised even himself. "You've been holding out on me, Harry," Fleur murmured, her eyes twinkling. "I think you might be a natural after all." Harry grinned, spinning her gently. "I had an excellent teacher. Though I must admit, it's much easier without worrying about stepping on your toes in private lessons." As they twirled and glided, Harry became aware that many people were watching them. But for once, he didn't mind the attention. In that moment, with Fleur in his arms and the music swelling around them, everything else faded away. The tournament, the challenges ahead, even the ever-present threat of dark forces, all of it seemed distant and unimportant. Other couples soon joined them on the dance floor, but Harry and Fleur remained lost in their own world, moving together as if they'd been dancing all their lives. As the song came to an end, they slowly came to a stop, still holding each other close. The hall burst into applause, and Harry suddenly remembered where they were. He and Fleur shared a smile, both a little flushed from the dance and the emotion of the moment. As they made their way off the dance floor, Harry caught sight of Sirius, who had somehow managed to be present as a chaperone. His godfather gave him a thumbs up and a wink, mouthing, "That's my boy." The night was young, and Harry Potter, for once, was looking forward to every moment of it. As he led Fleur around the hall, her hand warm in his, he realized that this joy, this laughter, this simple pleasure of a dance, this was what he was fighting for. In that moment, Harry felt more determined than ever to ensure that nights like this would always be possible in the wizarding world. Chapter 247, Waltzing Through Secrets. As the final notes of the opening dance faded, the great hall erupted into a whirlwind of excitement. Couples flooded the dance floor, the Weird Sisters launched into a more spirited tune, and the air crackled with laughter and anticipation. Harry, with Fla's hand still comfortably nestled in his, navigated through the sea of dancers towards a group of his friends. "Harry, you sly dog!" Roger exclaimed, his eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "You've been holding out on us." Roger's date, one of Fla's Beauxbatons classmates, couldn't contain her curiosity. "Fleur, ma chérie, how did this come about?" she asked, her accent thicker than Fla's. Cedric, standing with Cho, grinned broadly. "I have to hand it to you, Harry. You certainly know how to surprise us. Always with the unexpected, aren't you?" Harry, feeling more at ease than he'd anticipated, responded with a casual shrug. "What can I say? That's my life. It's full of surprises." Fleur, the epitome of grace, offered a charming smile to the group. "I hope you don't mind me stealing your friend for the evening," she said, her accent more pronounced in the presence of others. It seemed a shame for such a talented dancer to attend alone. Elvinia, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And how exactly did this arrangement come about?" Harry and Fleur exchanged a quick glance, a silent agreement passing between them. "We're just friends," Harry explained, his tone light but firm. "Seeing me so frustrated and unable to choose a date for the ball, Fleur kindly offered to be my partner. And I accepted. You know, for inter-school cooperation and all that." Fleur nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "It seemed like an excellent way to foster unity between our schools. After all, isn't that what the tournament is about?" Harry and Fleur had decided to keep their friendship and meetings a secret for now. With both of them being champions of their respective schools, they did not want to complicate things by bringing the competition into their relationship. That would attract unnecessary attention and trouble. Arabella, not entirely convinced, countered, "Right. Because that's the first thing that comes to mind when choosing a date for the Yule Ball. Inter-school cooperation." Fleur, unruffled, maintained her composure. "Well, I also did not have many options. And only Harry seems to be able to hold his own when talking to me. So my choice was I'm or coming alone." Harry nodded, adding with a touch of humor, "Also, you know me. Always there to lend a helping hand, even if it means facing certain death on the dance floor." The next song saved Harry from further interrogations. As people rejoined the dance floor, Harry took the opportunity to observe his surroundings. He saw his friends happily dancing with their partners. Professors McGonagall and Flitwick were attempting a rather comical version of the foxtrot, while Hagrid and Madame Maxime swayed gently, towering over the other dancers. The golden trio presented an interesting tableau. Charles twirled Ginny with surprising grace, while Hermione laughed at something Krum had said. The only sour note was Ron, scowling at his empty punch glass while his date, Lavender, had long since abandoned him to dance with Seamus. Throughout the evening, Harry and Fleur maintained a friendly but not overly intimate demeanor in public. They danced together frequently, their movements in perfect sync, but also made sure to mingle with others. Harry shared a dance with Susan, while Fleur graciously accepted a dance with a nervous Neville, who managed not to step on her toes. As the night wore on, Fleur leaned in close to Harry, her breath tickling his ear. "Harry, perhaps we could step outside for a moment? It's rather warm in air, don't you think?" Understanding her intent, Harry nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. They slipped out of the Great Hall discreetly, making their way to a secluded corner of the castle's rose garden. The night air was crisp and invigorating, a welcome relief from the warmth of the ball. Fairy lights twinkled among the bushes, casting a soft, magical glow over the scene. As they walked, their hands intertwined naturally, fingers lacing together as if they'd done this 100 times before. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant strains of music from the castle and the soft crunch of gravel beneath their feet. They continued until they were sure they were alone, the sounds of the ball fading to a distant murmur. Finally, Fleur spoke, her voice soft and filled with wonder. "This night, it has been magical, non? Like something out of a fairy tale." Harry nodded, turning to face her. His green eyes met her blue ones, and he felt a warmth spreading through his chest. "It really has been incredible. Fleur, I want you to know how much I've enjoyed these past few days. Getting to know you, learning to dance, it's been more than I ever expected." Fleur's eyes softened, her free hand reaching up to gently cup Harry's cheek. "For me as well, Harry. You are, quite different from what I expected. So much more." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The fairy lights dimmed, the distant music faded, and all that existed was the two of them. Slowly, almost hesitantly, they leaned towards each other. Their lips met in a soft, sweet kiss, gentle and full of promise. As they parted, both slightly breathless, Harry couldn't help but grin. "Well, that's certainly one way to foster international magical cooperation," he quipped, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Fleur laughed, the sound like silver bells in the quiet garden. "Indeed," she replied, her eyes dancing with amusement. "Though perhaps we should keep this particular method to ourselves, non?" Their moment of shared laughter was interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. They quickly stepped apart, trying to appear casual, though their flushed cheeks and bright eyes might have given them away. To Harry's surprise, it was Sirius who rounded the corner, a goofy smile plastered on his face. "Well, Sirius said, his eyes twinkling with unbridled mischief. "What do we have here? A secret rendezvous in the garden?" The godfather is proud, though perhaps a bit concerned about the timing. Harry felt his face flush even deeper. "Sirius! What are you doing here in Hogwarts? Shouldn't you be with Amelia?" Sirius's grin widened. "She's here too, pup. We couldn't miss out on this grand occasion, so we joined the Auror delegation for protection. You would have noticed had you not been so preoccupied." Fleur, ever graceful even in unexpected situations, offered Sirius a charming smile. "Mr. Black, I presume? Harry has told me much about you. All good things, I assure you." Sirius bowed with exaggerated formality, nearly toppling over in the process. "All good things? Well, we can't have that. I have a reputation to maintain, you know. Though knowing my godson, he's probably warned you about my devilishly handsome looks and irresistible charm." Harry groaned, fighting the urge to bury his face in his hands. "Sirius, please. You're embarrassing me in front of my date." His godfather laughed, a bark-like sound that echoed in the quiet garden. All right. I'll leave you two lovebirds alone. I was rooting for you two ever since that duel in the Under-17 Dueling Championship. Saw the spark, I did. It was only a matter of time." As Sirius turned to leave, he winked at them, his expression softening for a moment. "Oh, an excellent choice of hiding spot. I used this very same corner back in my day. The rosebushes are excellent for quick escapes. Just, be careful, you two. The tournament's not over yet." With that parting advice, he sauntered off, whistling a jaunty tune and leaving Harry and Fleur alone once more. Harry turned to Fleur, an apologetic look on his face. "I'm so sorry about that. Serious can be a bit much. He means well, though." Fleur smiled, taking Harry's hand once more. "Do not apologize, Harry. He seems wonderful. You are lucky to have someone who cares for you so much. And he is right, we should be careful." Harry nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "You're right. But, that doesn't mean we can't find moments like this, does it?" Fleur's smile widened. "Non, it does not. We will just have to be creative." With a shared look of understanding and anticipation, they returned to the ball separately, rejoining their respective friend groups as if nothing had happened. But as the night wore on, Harry found himself repeatedly glancing at Fleur across the room, marveling at how events had unfolded. What had started as a simple dance lesson had blossomed into something more, a secret connection that added an element of excitement to the tournament. The clock struck midnight, signaling the end of the ball. As students began to file out of the Great Hall, many looking tired but happy, Harry and Fleur shared one last dance, maintaining a friendly distance for the benefit of onlookers. "Thank you for tonight, Harry," Fleur murmured as the dance ended. "It was parfait." Harry smiled, stepping back as the song concluded. "Thank you, Fleur, for everything." They parted ways in the entrance hall, each returning to their respective dormitories with their schoolmates. To all outward appearances, their Yule Ball date had been a one-time occurrence, a brief moment of inter-school unity. But as Harry crawled into bed that night, his mind swirling with memories of silver blonde hair and soft lips, he knew that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. Chapter 248, The Potter Manor. In the wake of the Yule Ball, Hogwarts buzzed with excitement and speculation. Harry Potter, no stranger to being the center of attention, found himself once again under the microscope of public scrutiny. As he navigated the ancient corridors, whispers and not-so-subtle glances dogged his every step, snippets of conversations reaching his ears. "Did you see them dancing? They looked so perfect together. I heard it was just a one-time thing. You know, for the tournament and all. But the way they looked at each other. There's definitely more to this story." With the practiced ease of one long accustomed to being in the spotlight, Harry maintained an air of nonchalance. He neither confirmed nor denied the swirling rumors, his face a mask of mild amusement. When cornered, he'd simply shrug and say, "Fleur and I are friends." It seemed like a good idea for inter-school cooperation. The words felt hollow on his tongue, a pale shadow of the warmth and connection he'd experienced during those magical moments with Fleur. Fleur, for her part, proved equally adept at deflecting curiosity. She glided through the castle with her usual grace, treating Harry with the same polite friendliness she showed all the champions. To the casual observer, their Yule Ball partnership appeared nothing more than a diplomatic gesture, a fleeting moment of unity in a competition designed to divide. Harry and Fleur had agreed to keep their relationship casual in public while meeting in private, just as they had during their secret dance lessons. This arrangement, while frustrating, aligned with Harry's broader plans. He knew that if he allowed himself to be constantly in Fleur's radiant presence, the temptation to set aside his other responsibilities would be overwhelming. One such plan, long postponed, now called to him with an urgency he could no longer ignore, visiting the Potter Manor. Months had passed since he'd become Lord Potter, gaining access to his family's properties and legacies. Yet, for reasons both practical and emotional, he had delayed this pilgrimage to his ancestral home. Now, with the Yule Ball behind him and a rare moment of relative calm, Harry seized the opportunity. Slipping away from his well-meaning but persistent admirers, Harry made his way to Hogsmeade. With a final glance at the towering spires of Hogwarts, he turned on the spot, disapparating with a soft pop that seemed to echo in the crisp winter air. Dash! The world compressed and stretched, before resolving into a new scene. Potter Manor loomed before him, though at first glance, one would never know it. Powerful wards, the work of generations of skilled witches and wizards, concealed the true nature of the property. To uninitiated eyes, all that was visible were imposing wrought iron gates, standing sentinel before what appeared to be a wild, untamed jungle. With a deep breath, Harry pressed the Potter lordship ring to the gate's center. The illusion melted away like morning mist, revealing sprawling grounds surrounding a stately manor. To eyes accustomed to the Black Castle's grandeur, Potter Manor seemed almost quaint, yet it exuded a warmth that the Black residence lacked. As Harry stepped through the gates, a rush of familiarity washed over him like a warm summer breeze. Long-buried memories stirred, fragments of a childhood half-forgotten struggling to surface. "Are you ready, Myra?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. With a gentle pop that seemed to echo in the stillness, Myra appeared, her large eyes glistening with a mixture of excitement and nostalgia. "Myra is ready, Master Harry," she said, her voice quavering slightly. "It has been many years since we've been here together." Harry nodded, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips. "A lifetime ago, it feels like." As they approached the manor, each step seemed to peel away the years. Suddenly, Harry wasn't a battle-hardened teenager anymore, but a small child, racing up these very steps, his laughter echoing across the grounds as he rushed to spend time with his grandparents while his parents were away on order business. The grand foyer's scent hit him like a physical force, cinnamon, old books, and something uniquely home that he couldn't quite name. For a heartbeat, he could almost see his grandfather, Fleamont, striding across the room, arms outstretched for a hug. Harry's eyes misted, the weight of happy memories pressing on his heart. Myra, sensing his emotion, gently took his hand in her small one, offering silent comfort. In the sitting room, Harry's gaze locked onto a comfortable armchair by the fireplace. Muscle memory took over as he curled up in it. "This was Grandma Euphemia's chair," he murmured. "She'd read to me here. Beetle the Bard, stories about James as a boy." Myra smiled, her own memories surfacing. Mistress Euphemia had the best stories. She always said family history was the most important magic of all. Each room brought fresh waves of recollection. The kitchen, where the ghost of laughter lingered as he remembered helping his grandmother bake, standing on a stool to reach the counter, flour dusting his nose. The study, where his grandfather had imparted life lessons through cleverly disguised stories, his eyes twinkling with wisdom and mischief in equal measure. The absence of moving portraits struck Harry anew, the silent walls a testament to the Potter family's philosophy. Honoring the lesson of the third Peverell brother, they eschewed magical portraits, believing they trapped a part of the soul. While Harry respected this tradition, a part of him longed for the chance to speak with his ancestors, to garner wisdom from their experiences beyond what was written in books. Finally, Harry reached his true destination, the library. Here too, memories flooded back. His grandmother's voice seemed to echo, "Knowledge is power, Harry, but wisdom is knowing how to use it." He ran his fingers along book spines, remembering hours spent listening to his grandparents read and recount family lore. At the library's heart, protected by formidable wards that yielded to Harry's touch like a flower opening to the sun, lay a hidden compartment. From it, he reverently withdrew the object of his quest, the Potter grimoire. As he held the ancient tome, its leather warm and alive under his fingers, Harry felt a profound connection not just to his grandparents, but to generations of Potters stretching back through time. It was as if all those who had come before were standing with him, their collective knowledge and strength flowing into him through this book. The temptation to delve into the grimoire's pages right then was almost overwhelming, but Harry knew he couldn't risk losing track of time and having his absence from Hogwarts noticed. Reluctantly, he tucked the precious book into his bag. Harry's gaze lingered on the library's shelves, each book a repository of knowledge waiting to be explored. A part of him longed to stay, to lose himself in the wisdom of his ancestors. But he knew that now was not the time. There were more pressing matters to attend to, enemies to face, a dark future to prevent. The books would wait, the world, perhaps, would not. As he walked back through the gates, Harry turned for a final look at Potter Manor, bathed in the soft light of dusk. "I'll be back," he promised quietly, his voice carrying the weight of both nostalgia and determination. With the grimoire safely in his possession and his heart full of bittersweet memories, Harry prepared to return to Hogwarts. As he disapparated, the last thing he saw was Potter Manor fading from view, its windows gleaming like eyes watching over him, a silent guardian of the past and a beacon for the future. Chapter 249, Secrets of the Peravells. Harry returned to Hogwarts, his mind a whirlwind of memories and his heart heavy with a bittersweet mixture of sadness and determination. The Potter family grimoire, shrunk and safely tucked in his pocket, seemed to pulse with potential, a tangible link to the heritage he'd only just begun to explore. The castle corridors bustled with students still caught up in the excitement of the Yule Ball, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to Harry's somber mood. He paid them no heed, his feet carrying him swiftly to the Ravenclaw common room. To his relief, he found it empty, the usual studious atmosphere replaced by the lingering excitement of the previous night's festivities. Harry rushed to his dormitory, his heart pounding with anticipation. Once inside, he drew the curtains around his bed with a swift, decisive motion, creating a cocoon of privacy. Settling comfortably on his bed, Harry took a deep breath, centering himself for what he knew would be a profound experience. With reverent care, he withdrew the grimoire from his pocket, restoring it to its original size. As he opened the cover, the first page revealed an inscription in elegant, flowing script. To the potter who holds this tome. Remember always, knowledge is power. But wisdom is knowing how to use it. May you find both within these pages. The words resonated deeply with Harry, echoing the lessons his professors had tried to instill in him. Though he didn't know who had penned this sage advice, he felt a connection to them, a shared understanding across the ages. As he began to leaf through the grimoire, Harry was amazed by the breadth and depth of magical knowledge contained within. There were spells he'd never heard of, potion recipes that seemed to defy conventional brewing wisdom, and theories on magic that made his head spin. Each page was a testament to the innovations and discoveries of generations of potters, their insights preserved for their descendants. As Harry delved deeper into the grimoire, he discovered a section that made his heart race, the history of the Potter family. He lost himself in these pages, time slipping away unnoticed as he absorbed the tales of his ancestors. Their triumphs and struggles, their moments of glory and their darkest hours, all were laid bare before him, painting a vivid picture of the legacy he carried. Suddenly, a page caught his eye, the header standing out in bold, ornate lettering, the Peravells legacy. Harry's breath caught in his throat as he began to read, his fingers tracing the words as if to absorb their meaning through touch alone. The section spoke of the Potter's descent from Ignotus Peravells, the third and wisest of the legendary Peravells brothers. It recounted their feats and accomplishments, building up to a personal message from Ignotus himself, preserved through the ages. I, Ignotus Peravells, set down these words for my descendants. Let it be known that we three brothers were more than mere wizards. We were creators, enchanters, pushing the boundaries of magic itself. Our greatest works, the Hallows, came at a great cost. The full truth of their creation is a burden I choose not to pass on. Suffice it to say, we touched powers beyond our understanding, and the consequences of our hubris haunt me still. Of the three Hallows, only the cloak remains in our line. It is our greatest treasure and our heaviest responsibility. Use it wisely, for it holds secrets yet untapped. Harry's eyes widened as he read on, his heart pounding in his chest. The cloak, in its dormant state, functions as any invisibility cloak, save for its permanence. However, there exists a way to awaken its true power. Beware, for once awakened, the cloak binds to its user for life. Only upon the user's death can it be unbound and returned to its dormant state. The activation ritual was described in detail, a few words in an ancient tongue, a drop of blood freely given. But the warnings that followed gave Harry pause. The awakened cloak grants powers beyond mere invisibility. It can merge with the user's very being, allowing invisibility at a thought. It also shields from most forms of magical detection and makes you almost impossible to find. However, this power comes at a price. The cloak, once bound, cannot be shared or passed on until the user's death. It becomes a part of you, for better or worse. Harry sat back, his mind reeling from the implications. The cloak he had always known, the one he had thought was merely a superior invisibility cloak, suddenly revealed itself as something far more potent. The ability to become invisible at will, to be shielded from magical detection, it was a power that could change everything. He thought of all the times the cloak had saved him, all the adventures it had made possible. And now, to learn that its true potential had been dormant all along. The temptation to perform the ritual was almost overwhelming. Harry imagined himself able to vanish in an instant, hidden even from Moody's magical eye. The warnings, however, were clear and sobering. Once bound, the cloak would be his alone. No more sneaking around with anyone else under its folds. No passing it down to his own children one day, not until he was on his deathbed. Harry's fingers hovered over the ritual instructions, tracing the ancient words without speaking them. It was a decision that couldn't be made lightly, not without careful consideration of all the consequences. As he continued reading, he found more insights into the Potter family history. Generations of his ancestors had grappled with the legacy of the Peravells, each adding their own discoveries and warnings to the grimoire. One entry, penned by his great-grandfather Charles, stood out. The true strength of our family lies not in artifacts or spells, but in our choices. Each generation must decide how to honor our legacy while forging their own path. Remember, magic is a tool, not a crutch. True power comes from within. These words resonated deeply with Harry. It was a reminder that while the cloak and other artifacts were powerful, they were just tools and should not be too relied on. Harry closed the grimoire, his mind swirling with newfound knowledge. The history of his family, the secrets of the cloak, it was almost overwhelming. He felt as if he'd lived a lifetime in the span of a few hours, traversing centuries of magical history and family lore. Suddenly, with a jolt of panic, Harry realized how much time had passed. Night had fallen, and he was supposed to meet Fleur. The thought of disappointing her, of making her think he'd forgotten their rendezvous after the magical night they'd shared at the ball, filled him with dread. Hastily shrinking the grimoire and tucking it safely away, Harry rushed from the dormitory. His mind was still abuzz with all he'd learned, but as he hurried through the castle corridors, his thoughts turned to Fleur. He had gained and learned a lot today, but for now, all that mattered was not to keep Fleur waiting. Chapter 250, Secrets in the Bubbles. The evening air was crisp as Harry made his way to his and Fleu's agreed meeting spot. His heart raced with anticipation. This was their first official secret date since the Yule Ball, where their relationship had blossomed from friendship into something more. As he approached, he saw Fleu's silhouette, illuminated by the soft glow of her wand. "I'm sorry I'm late," Harry began, slightly out of breath. Fleu's initial frown melted as he explained about his visit to Potter Manor. "Oh, Harry," Fleur said softly, understanding flooding her features. She stepped closer, taking his hand in hers. "Your grandparents. I know how much they mean to you." As they settled into conversation, both felt the shift in their dynamic. The Yule Ball had changed things, bringing them closer, and making their connection more intimate. Fleur found herself marveling at how far they'd come since their first encounter. Harry was unlike anyone she had ever met. He was the first male outside her family to act normally around her, seemingly immune to her villa allure. It was refreshing, liberating even, to be seen for who she was rather than what she looked like. What had started as a one-sided rivalry since the dueling tournament had grown into genuine affection, and now, standing here in the moonlight, Fleur felt her heart swell with emotions she was only beginning to understand. As they talked, Fleur found herself reflecting on her evolving perception of Harry Potter. He was an enigma, this boy who had captured her attention and, increasingly, her heart. Initially, she had mistaken his composed demeanor for aloofness, his impressive magical prowess for arrogance. After all, how could someone so young, already a dueling champion, not be full of pride? But as they spent more time together, she began to see the truth. Harry was indeed strong, but he carried that strength with a humility that continually surprised her. Through Harry, Fleur began to see her own flaws more clearly. She realized that while her villa heritage gave her beauty, it didn't give her the right to lord it over others. She had been guilty of that, she knew, using her looks as a shield and a weapon. But Harry's genuine kindness, his ability to see beyond the surface, made her want to be better. As the days turned into weeks, Harry and Fleu's secret meetings became a nightly ritual. They would find secluded spots in the castle or sneak out onto the grounds, always careful to avoid detection. These moments became their sanctuary, a respite from the pressures of the tournament and the scrutiny of their peers. For Harry, these meetings were a welcome break from his rigorous training schedule, which now included studying the Potter grimoire. He had decided to postpone binding the Cloak of Invisibility until the end of the year, realizing how useful it was for their nightly outings. The ability to sneak around unseen with Fleur was too precious to give up just yet. As January progressed, the reality of the upcoming second task began to weigh heavily on all the champions. Fleur, in particular, found her preparation more challenging than anticipated. Madame Maxime's disapproval of her choice of date for the Yule Ball had resulted in a sudden lack of assistance with task preparation. Fleur was struggling. The screech of the golden egg continued to baffle her, and without the support of her headmistress, she felt increasingly isolated. Harry, noticing Fleur's growing frustration during their secret meetings, gently offered his help. "Fleur, if you're having trouble with the egg, I could give you a hint," he suggested. Fleur's competitive spirit flared. "Non, Harry. I appreciate the offer, but I must do this on my own. I am the Beaux Batons champion." Harry respected her decision, but it pained him to see her struggling. As the days passed, dark circles appeared under Fleur's eyes, and her usual confident demeanor began to waver. One particularly cold evening in late January, Harry decided it was time to intervene. He caught up with Fleur after dinner, pulling her into a secluded alcove. "Fleur, you need to rest," Harry said, concern evident in his voice. All this stress isn't going to help you. Let's take a night off, and you can go back to the egg refreshed in the morning. Fleur looked skeptical. What do you have in mind? Harry's eyes twinkled with mischief. My prefect friends have been raving about the prefect's bathroom. They say it's particularly soothing. I've never been there myself. What do you say we check it out? Fleur couldn't help but smile at Harry's enthusiasm. Hogwarts has not impressed me much, except for Yule Ball and its secrets. Let's see if this new place will change my mind. Then I'll see you this evening, my lady, Harry said with an exaggerated bow. Remember to bring your egg along. Maybe relaxation will inspire you to crack the clue. That night, as the castle slept, Harry led a curious Fleur to the prefect's bathroom. The room was a sight to behold, bathed in soft, multicolored light from the stained glass windows. The enormous bathtub in the center looked more like a small swimming pool. Fleur's eyes widened as she took in the opulent surroundings. The water looks inviting, but Harry, are we really here just to relax? Harry's innocent expression didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course. Now, let's get changed and unwind. As they changed behind separate screens, both felt a nervous excitement. When Fleur emerged, Harry felt his breath catch in his throat. Her school-issued swimsuit, though modest, hugged her figure in a way that left little to the imagination. The silvery blue material seemed to shimmer in the soft light. Wow, Harry breathed, unable to stop himself. You look stunning. Fleur blushed slightly, but her eyes were busy taking in Harry's appearance. His years of rigorous training had sculpted his body into a lean, muscular form. You are not so bad yourself, Harry, she said, her voice slightly husky. I see the consistent daily training has paid off. They stood there for a moment, each admiring the other, before Harry cleared his throat. Shall we? He asked, gesturing to the bath. As they settled into the warm, bubble-filled water, both felt the tension of the past weeks begin to melt away. They talked and laughed, enjoying each other's company without the pressure of the tournament looming over them. After some time, Harry casually asked, Pass me your egg, will you? I want to see if it sounds the same as mine. Fleur handed it over, curious. Harry opened it, and the familiar screeching filled the bathroom. Fleur winced. Shut it now, Harry. I've had enough of that noise. With a mischievous grin, Harry tossed the egg back to Fleur. Here, you close it. As the egg arced through the air, Fleur reached out to catch it. But the soapy water made it slippery, and it slipped through her fingers, plunging into the bath with a splash. That was not funny, Harry. Fleur exclaimed though a smile tugged at her lips. It kind of was, Harry chuckled. You might want to retrieve it quickly, though. Who knows what the water might do to the enchantments? With a playful glare, Fleur dove under the water to retrieve the egg. Suddenly, her eyes widened, and she stayed submerged for nearly a minute before resurfacing, gasping. The egg! She exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. Underwater, it sings. Harry, did you know about this? Harry's attempt at an innocent expression failed miserably. Fleur's eyes narrowed as realization dawned. You knew, she accused. You planned this whole evening to help me solve the clue. Harry shrugged, unrepentant. Maybe. But technically, you solved it yourself. I just provided the setting. Fleur's initial irritation melted into gratitude. Thank you, Harry, she said softly. Just thanks. Harry teased, his green eyes twinkling. Fleur's gratitude manifested in a deep, passionate kiss. As they embraced, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in their bubble of warmth and affection. Just as things were starting to heat up, a high-pitched giggle echoed through the bathroom. They broke apart, startled, to see moaning Myrtle floating above them, a mischievous grin on her translucent face. Oh, don't mind me, Myrtle said, her voice dripping with amusement. I was just enjoying the show. It's not often I get such entertainment in my bathroom. Harry and Fleur quickly separated, both blushing furiously. Myrtle! Harry exclaimed, embarrassed and slightly annoyed. This isn't your bathroom. Yours is on the second floor. Myrtle pouted. When I feel bored, I like to travel around. No one's forcing me to stay in one place. Had your fun? Harry asked, exasperated. Can you leave now? With another giggle and a dramatic sigh, Myrtle dove into a nearby toilet, disappearing with a splash. The mood thoroughly broken, Harry and Fleur climbed out of the bath. As they dried off and got dressed, an awkward silence fell between them. "I suppose we should go," Harry said finally, running a hand through his damp hair. "It's getting late." As they prepared to leave, Fleur paused at the door. "Thank you, Harry," she said softly. "Not just for Ze Clue, but for everything." Her kiss, tender and full of promise, left Harry feeling light-headed with joy. As Harry made his way back to Ravenclaw Tower, he couldn't wipe the grin off his face. Despite Myrtle's untimely interruption, the evening had been a resounding success. Fleur had solved the egg's clue, and their relationship had taken a significant step forward. As Harry crawled into bed that night, his mind full of bubbles, songs, and stolen kisses. With a smile on his face and warmth in his heart, Harry drifted off to sleep, dreaming of silver blonde hair and the soft melody of an underwater song. Chapter 251, Plunging into Preparation. The morning after their nocturnal adventure in the prefect's bathroom, Harry and Fleur met in a secluded corner of the Hogwarts grounds. The air between them crackled with a newfound tension, equal parts excitement and uncertainty. "So," Harry began, running a hand through his hair, "last night was wonderful," Fleur finished, her cheeks tinged with a faint blush. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "Harry, I think perhaps we should take things slow." Harry nodded. "I'm game for whatever you're comfortable with, Fleur. As long as we're good, I'm happy." Fleur's shoulders relaxed visibly. "You are very understanding, Harry. It's just, with ZE tournament and everything." "Hey, no need to explain," Harry said, his tone light but sincere. "We've got plenty of time to figure things out. We've got a good thing going here. No need to rush and muck it up." With that potential awkwardness navigated, they turned their attention to the looming second task. As they discussed the egg's clue, Harry's expression grew serious, the weight of his knowledge from the canon pressing down on him. "Fleur," he said gravely, "I think the something precious they'll take isn't an object. It's likely to be a person." Fleur's eyes widened, her face paling. "Monday Dieu. Gabrielle." Harry nodded solemnly. "You should warn your family. There's a chance they might use your parents or sister as a hostage." As they parted ways, Harry watched Fleur go, hoping his warning would change the course of events he remembered. But even if it didn't, he silently vowed to ensure everyone's safety. In the days that followed, the champions threw themselves into preparation. Harry, already confident in his strategy, found himself ambushed by his well-meaning friends one sunny afternoon by the lake. "All right, Team Potter," Cedric announced, puffing out his chest importantly, "Operation Keep Harry from Drowning is officially underway." Harry raised an eyebrow, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Catchy name." Elvinia, arms laden with books, ignored the sarcasm. "We've narrowed it down to 3 options for breathing underwater: the bubblehead charm, gillyweed, or partial transfiguration." "Let's go with the bubblehead charm," Harry said quickly, his mind already several steps ahead. "Wouldn't want to ruin my dashing good looks with gills, would we?" His friends rolled their eyes, unaware that Harry's choice was based on a plan that required minimal swimming. He was also not too fond of the wait time for the gillyweed effects to wear off. Roger snorted. "Your dashing good looks might be the least of your worries down there, mate. The lake's not exactly a day at the beach." Harry tried to make his friends forget about helping him train, but Reggie cut in, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Come on, Harry. Let us help. We're dying to be part of the action." "Fine," Harry sighed, a smile tugging at his lips. "But I warn you, my training regimen is not for the faint of heart. No backing out in the middle." Everyone cheered at Harry's agreement. They spent the next hour discussing potential obstacles. The cold was an obvious issue, easily solved with warming charms. The darkness could be countered with Lumos spells. The lake's inhabitants posed a trickier problem, requiring a mix of defensive and offensive spells. Then Cedric brought up a point that caught Harry's attention. "You know, performing magic underwater might be tricky. It's harder to move your arms quickly in water." Harry, seeing an opportunity for both fun and practical training, suggested they all practice underwater spell casting. His friends leapt at the chance, eager to be part of a champion's training. The following Saturday dawned bright and cold. As the group assembled by the Great Lake, their breath misting in the air, Harry grinned at his shivering friends. "Ready for a refreshing dip?" What followed was a morning of chaos, laughter, and surprising breakthroughs. The icy water shocked them at first, eliciting yelps and curses that would have made Madame Pomfrey blush. But as they warmed up, the lake became their watery classroom. Harry taught them the bubblehead charm, watching with pride as his friends mastered the spell one by one. They practiced silent casting, their wands leaving trails of shimmering bubbles in the murky depths. Cedric surfaced with a gasp after successfully casting a silent stunning spell. "Blimey, Harry! This is brilliant! I never realized how different magic feels down there." Arabella, initially skeptical, now wore a wide grin. "I hate to admit it, but this is actually useful. And oddly fun, in a cold, wet sort of way." As the training progressed, the lake became a playground of magical experimentation. Alicia and Roger raced each other, their spells propelling them through the water. Cedric perfected an underwater shield charm, while Elvinia and Arabella engaged in a silent, bubble-filled duel. Harry, unable to resist, sent a powerful jet of water at his unsuspecting friends, laughing at their sputtering indignation. The morning dissolved into a free-for-all water fight, magic and mischief blending in equal measure. As the sun began to set, they trudged back to shore, exhausted but exhilarated. "Same time tomorrow," Cedric suggested, wringing water from his robes. The unanimous agreement was punctuated by excited chatter about new spells to try. Unknown to Harry, Fleur had been watching from afar, her curiosity piqued. That night, during their nightly meetings, she couldn't contain her questions. "What exactly were you doing in Zee Lake, Harry?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with intrigue. Harry grinned, recounting their underwater adventures. When he mentioned the lake's inhabitants, mer-people, Grindylows, and who knew what else, Fleur's eyes widened. "I thought it would just be an underwater maze," she exclaimed. "I should start training as well." Harry's eyes twinkled mischievously. "How about we have our own private sessions? Turn our nightly meetings into moonlit swims." Fleur's enthusiastic agreement led to a new chapter in their preparation. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped into the icy waters of the Great Lake, wands at the ready. Their first night was a shock to the system. Even with warming charms, the lake was bitterly cold. "Merde!" Fleur gasped as she surfaced, her teeth chattering. "It is freezing." Harry, trying to keep his own shivering under control, grinned. "Look at the bright side, at least the giant squid is probably too cold to bother us." Fleur's retort was lost as a tentacle briefly broke the surface nearby, as if the squid was determined to prove Harry wrong. As the nights went on, they grew more accustomed to the cold and more adept at their underwater skills. Harry taught Fleur the finer points of the bubblehead charm, and they practiced casting spells silently, their wands leaving trails of bubbles in the murky water. "Remember," Harry said during one session, demonstrating a particularly tricky maneuver, "in the water, we're slower, but the creatures will be faster. You have to anticipate movements more, plan your spells in advance." Their sessions weren't all serious training, though. There were splash fights that left them both laughing and gasping for air, races from one end of their training area to the other, and quiet moments floating on their backs, staring up at the stars. During one such moment, Fleur turned to Harry, her expression soft in the moonlight. "Harry," she said quietly, "thank you for this. I don't know how I would have prepared without you." Harry squeezed her hand gently under the water. "You'd have managed. You're brilliant, Fleur. But I'm glad I could help." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the cold of the lake seemed to disappear. Then, with a mischievous grin, Fleur splashed water in Harry's face and darted away, laughing. "Race you to Zee shore, Monday champion." As Harry gave chase, he couldn't help but think that, although he did not like this whole Triwizard tournament, these moments made it all worthwhile. As the days passed and the second task drew nearer, both Harry's friends and Fleur had improved their skills dramatically. Their prowess in silent casting began to show even in regular classes, earning curious looks from professors and fellow students alike. During one particularly challenging charms lesson, Professor Flitwick was demonstrating a complex atmospheric charm. To everyone's surprise, Harry, Cedric, and Elvinia performed it perfectly on their first try silently. "My word!" Flitwick squeaked, nearly toppling off his stack of books. "Excellent work! Might I ask where you've been practicing such advanced silent casting?" The friends exchanged knowing glances. "Oh, you know," Harry said casually, "just a bit of extra studying by the lake." If anyone noticed the poorly suppressed grins or the way Reggie suddenly developed a coughing fit that sounded suspiciously like laughter, they didn't mention it. As for Harry himself, he had perfected his underwater spell casting, becoming more comfortable with wandless magic in the depths. Though he hoped there would be no need for battle beneath the waves, experience had taught him to prepare for the unexpected. As the day of the second task approached, Harry felt a mix of anticipation and confidence. Whatever challenges were in store for him during the task, he was ready. He hoped it would be a quiet event, but a small part of him, the part that had faced danger head-on since his first year at Hogwarts, secretly wished for a little excitement as long as no one else's life was at risk. Chapter 252, The second task begins. The morning of the second task dawned crisp and clear, a deceptive calm blanketing the Hogwarts grounds. The sun peeked over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the landscape, as Harry completed his brisk warm-up jog around the castle. His breath misted in the cool air as he made his way back to prepare for the challenge ahead. In his dormitory, Harry carefully laid out his chosen attire. His strategy, if successful, would minimize his time in the water, so he opted for close-fitting athletic wear over a wetsuit. As an additional safeguard, he donned basilisk armor beneath his clothes, its scales a hidden shield against potential dangers lurking in the depths. As he dressed, Harry couldn't help but chuckle, recalling the amusing conversations he'd had with his friends about their vehement refusals to be his hostage when approached by the professors. Upon learning from Harry about the frigid night awaiting them in the lake's depths, they had been comically adamant in their rejections. "Sorry, mate," Roger had said, barely suppressing a grin, "but a night in the freezing lake? I'd rather face a dragon." Their reluctance had left the professors scrambling to find a suitable stand-in, much to Harry's amusement. He took a certain satisfaction in causing Dumbledore and his colleagues this minor inconvenience. After all, Harry reasoned, if he was doing their job of keeping the school safe, he deserved some fun at their expense. As Harry made his way down to the Great Hall for breakfast, he found it buzzing with excitement. Students from all three schools were chattering animatedly, speculating about what the task might entail. Harry calmly ate his breakfast, his composure a stark contrast to the nervous energy around him. After breakfast, Harry began the walk down to the Black Lake, where the second task would take place. The February air was crisp, biting at his exposed skin, but Harry barely noticed. His mind was focused, running through his strategies one last time. As he approached the lake, Harry was struck by the transformation that had taken place overnight. The usually serene shoreline had been completely redesigned to accommodate the spectacle of the Triwizard Tournament. Massive stands had been erected along the shore, draped in the colors of the three competing schools. They towered over the dark waters of the lake, which lapped ominously at the shore. The usually peaceful lakeside was now a hive of activity. Ministry officials scurried about, making last-minute preparations. A judge's table had been set up on a raised platform, offering a clear view of the lake. Harry could see Dumbledore, Madame Maxime, and Karkaroff already in their seats, engaged in serious conversation. Harry made his way to the Champions Gathering area, a small tent set up near the water's edge. He was the first to arrive, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the frantic energy around him. Bagman and Crouch Sr., the man Harry knew to be the disguised Crouch Jr., were already there, looking slightly harried as they made final preparations. "Ah, Mr. Potter!" Bagman boomed, his face breaking into a wide grin. "Eager to get started, I see." Harry shook hands with both men, offering them a polite smile. "Good morning, Mr. Bagman, Mr. Crouch. I hope the preparations are going smoothly." Crouch nodded curtly, while Bagman launched into an enthusiastic description of the safety measures in place. Harry listened politely, all the while scanning the area, taking in every detail. As they waited for the other champions, Harry looked for his friends in the growing crowd. He spotted them near the front of the Hogwarts section: Cedric, Roger, and the others, all bundled up against the cold but looking excited. He gave them a quick wave, which they returned enthusiastically. After acknowledging his friends, Harry did a double check on his belongings to see if everything was in place. His wand was secure in its holster, ready to be drawn at a moment's notice. The small vial of gillyweed was tucked safely in a waterproof pouch, a backup plan in case his primary strategy failed. Everything was set. The arrival of Victor Krum interrupted Harry's final preparations. The Bulgarian entered the tent with his usual slouch, but his eyes were alert and focused. He gave Harry a curt nod, which Harry returned. There was a mutual respect between them, born from their shared status as international competition champions. Good morning, Victor, Harry said, extending his hand. Ready for a swim? Crumb's usually stoic expression cracked into a small smile as he shook Harry's hand. As ready as one can be to dive into a freezing lake in February, he replied, his accent thick but his English much improved since the start of the tournament. Their quiet exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Fleur. The usually composed French champion looked flustered, her silvery hair slightly disheveled and her blue eyes wide with worry. As soon as she entered, Harry sent out a gentle mind probe, their secret form of communication that they had developed over weeks of secret meetings. "What's wrong?" he asked silently, his mental voice tinged with concern. Fleur's response came swiftly, her mental voice tinged with anxiety. "It's Gabrielle. She's my hostage for the task." Harry's brow furrowed slightly. "How? I thought you warned your family about this possibility." "I did," Fleur replied, her mental voice filled with exasperation. "But Gabrielle, she missed me and she was excited at the prospect of being a part of this tournament. She convinced our parents to let her participate. They thought it would be safe, with all the professors and headmasters present." Harry didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this revelation. It looked like little Gabrielle had her parents wrapped around her finger. If Harry had an 8-year-old daughter, he would never let her be anywhere close to danger, but here little Gabrielle had somehow convinced her parents to give her permission, even after the chaos of the first task. The wizarding world and their skewed views of safety never ceased to amaze him. Outwardly, Harry maintained his calm demeanor, but he sent waves of comfort through their mental link. "Don't worry, Fleur. You're well prepared for this. Remember our training. Your sister will be safe. You will save her and complete this task." He paused, then added with a touch of his characteristic confidence, "And if anything goes wrong, I'll be there to save the day." Fleur's mental chuckle was tinged with both amusement and gratitude. "My hero," she teased, but Harry could feel her anxiety lessening. "Just don't let it go to your head, Mr. Potter. I might still beat you to the hostages." As Fleur visibly calmed herself, focusing her attention on the task ahead, the final champion arrived. Charles Potter entered the tent, looking nervous but determined. Harry noted with interest that his brother seemed more prepared than the canon Harry had been at this point. At the very least, Charles seemed to know how to swim, judging by his confident stance and the way he held himself. "Good morning, everyone," Charles said, his voice only slightly shaky. He nodded to each of them in turn, his gaze lingering on Harry for a moment longer. Harry returned the nod, offering a small smile. Despite their complicated relationship, he could offer some words of encouragement. "Morning, Charles. Ready for this?" Charles managed a weak grin. "As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose." Before any further conversation could take place, Ludo Bagman clapped his hands loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "Right then, champions. It's time to begin. If you'll all gather round, I'll explain the rules one last time." As Bagman launched into his explanation, Harry tuned him out, already knowing what to expect. Instead, he focused on looking around to see any signs of anything going wrong. With the experience of the first task, he knew he had to be careful. There was a chance that the fake Crouch had done something to cause trouble, and Harry was determined not to be caught off guard. His eyes scanned the tent, the lake shore, and as much of the water's surface as he could see. He looked for anything out of place, an unusually placed object, a shimmer in the air that might indicate a concealment charm, or even a suspiciously calm area of the lake. Seeing nothing immediately wrong, he turned his attention back to Bagman, who had finished giving instructions. The champions lined up at the edge of the lake, the cold water lapping at their feet. The stands were now full, a sea of excited faces looking down at them. The air was thick with anticipation, the crowd's excitement almost palpable. Bagman's voice boomed out over the grounds, magically amplified to reach even the farthest spectators. "Welcome, one and all, to the second task of the Triwizard Tournament." The cannon blast signaling the start of the task was moments away. Harry flexed his fingers, feeling the comforting weight of his wand in his hand. He cast one last glance at Fleur, sending a final message through their mental link. "Good luck. Stay safe." Fleur's response was immediate and warm. "You too, Harry. See you down there." As the cannon's boom echoed across the lake, sending ripples across its dark surface and startling a flock of birds from a nearby tree, Harry stepped forward on the platform. He was ready to give the watching audience a show they wouldn't soon forget. Chapter 253, The Second Task Spectacle. As the cannon's boom echoed across the black lake, 3 of the champions immediately plunged into the icy waters. Harry, however, remained on the platform, a knowing smile playing on his lips. The crowd's excited chatter turned to confused murmurs as they watched the elder Potter brother standing still, seemingly in no rush to begin the task. From his vantage point, Harry observed his fellow champion's strategies unfold. Fleur, her silvery hair gleaming in the weak February sunlight, cast the bubble head charm with graceful efficiency. The transparent bubble formed around her head, and without a moment's hesitation, she dove into the murky waters, her lithe form quickly disappearing beneath the surface. Crumb opted for a more dramatic approach. With a wave of his wand and a muttered incantation, his upper body began to transform. Within moments, where the Dumstrang champion had stood, there was now a bizarre hybrid of man and shark. Crumb's transfigured form sliced through the water with terrifying speed, heading in a different direction from Fleur. Charles had chosen a strategy that Harry found amusingly familiar. The boy popped something into his mouth, undoubtedly gillyweed, and after a moment of apparent discomfort, dove into the lake. Harry watched as Charles's neck developed gills, and his hands and feet became webbed. As the other champions disappeared from view, the crowd's attention focused squarely on Harry. Whispers of confusion and speculation rippled through the stands. What was he waiting for? Had he forgotten something? Was this part of some elaborate strategy? Ludo Bagman's magically amplified voice rang out, excitement evident in his tone. And they're off. Crumb, Delacour, and the younger Potter have dived straight in. But wait, what's this? Hadrian Potter seems to be taking a different approach. Harry knew it was time to act. With a deep breath, he centered himself, feeling the magic coursing through his body. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he stepped off the platform, not into the water, but onto it. The crowd's murmur of confusion turned to gasps of amazement as Harry began to run across the surface of the lake as if it were solid ground. His movements were fluid and graceful, each step precise and confident. It was a display of magical control that left even the most experienced witches and wizards in the audience speechless. I don't believe it! Bagman shouted, his voice reaching a fever pitch. Ladies and gentlemen, Hadrian Potter is running on water. But how? Wait, yes, I can see it now. He's creating ice beneath his feet as he moves. It also looks like he is casting without the help of his wand. Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Indeed, with each step Harry took, a small patch of ice formed instantaneously beneath his foot, only to melt away the moment he moved on. It was a feat of incredible magical precision and control, requiring split-second timing and unwavering concentration. The fact that Harry was doing this wandlessly only added to the spectacle. The spectators watched in awe as Harry sprinted across the lake, his path seemingly random to the untrained eye. Bagman, however, was quick to speculate. Potter seems to be heading in a very specific direction, Bagman observed, his voice filled with curiosity. But how could he possibly know where to go? Nobody can see under this dark lake. The hostages are hidden deep beneath the surface. Unbeknownst to everyone, including his fellow champions, Harry was following the signal from a tracking charm he had secretly placed on Hermione Granger the day before. It had been a calculated move, born from his knowledge of how the task would unfold. Out of all the potential hostages, Harry had been certain that Hermione would be one of them. The undetectable tracking charm was his ace in the hole, a secret advantage that would guide him unerringly to the hostage's location. As Harry neared his destination, he began to cast more complex magic. This time, he drew his wand, not wanting to push the boundaries of what the audience might accept as possible wandless magic. With a series of intricate movements, he began to create something that left the crowd gaping in disbelief. Merlin's beard! Bagman exclaimed, his voice cracking with excitement. Potter is now creating, are those ice stairs? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Hadrian Potter has conjured a staircase of ice rising from the lake. Extraordinary magic, but I must confess, I'm at a loss as to why. Surely Potter knows the hostages are in the water, not floating in the sky. The ice staircase was a marvel to behold. It spiraled upwards from the lake's surface, each step perfectly formed and gleaming in the pale sunlight. As Harry ascended the icy structure, which now towered above the lake's surface, the crowd held its collective breath. Upon reaching the summit of his icy creation, Harry paused for a moment. He stood there, poised at the edge, his figure silhouetted against the sky. Then, without a moment's hesitation, he dove into the dark waters below, his body arcing gracefully through the air before piercing the lake's surface with barely a splash. "And Potter has finally entered the lake," Bagman announced, his voice a mixture of relief and anticipation. "The stairs were just to give the dive a good boost. It makes sense now. What an entrance! I've never seen anything like it in all my years of Quidditch and magical sports." Beneath the surface, Harry cast a bubblehead charm for breathing and then, in a display of wandless magic that would have left even Dumbledore impressed, used jets of water from his hands to propel himself downward at incredible speed. The underwater world of the Black Lake rushed past him in a blur of murky greens and browns. Fish darted away in fright as he passed, and strands of underwater plants whipped in the currents he created. Harry's control was precise, adjusting his trajectory with minute movements of his hands and body. In what seemed like mere moments, Harry found himself in the heart of the Mer People's village. The sight that greeted him was breathtaking, a hidden world that few surface dwellers had ever witnessed. Elaborate structures carved from lake bedrock rose around him, their surfaces adorned with luminescent algae that cast an eerie, beautiful glow throughout the underwater settlement. The architecture was unlike anything seen in the wizarding world above, a blend of organic shapes and precise geometry that spoke to the Mer People's unique aesthetic and practical needs. Mer People, their skin a mottled grey-green and their long hair floating around their faces like living halos, watched him with curious yellow eyes as he passed. Their expressions were a mix of surprise and wariness. Clearly, they had not expected a champion to arrive so soon, and certainly not in such a dramatic fashion. Harry ignored the rushing Mer People, some of whom were hurriedly swimming to take up positions they had clearly planned to intimidate the champions. Their attempts at menace were somewhat undermined by their obvious shock at Harry's early arrival. Instead, he turned his attention to the center of the village, searching for the hostages. There, tethered to a giant statue of a merperson, were four figures: Neville Longbottom, Ginny Weasley, Hermione Granger, and a young girl who could only be Gabrielle Delacour. The statue itself was an imposing sight, a towering representation of a merperson warrior, its stone face set in an eternal, fierce expression. The hostages floated eerily in the water, their hair drifting around their faces, eyes closed as if in peaceful sleep. Harry quickly realized that Neville was his designated hostage. While Neville was not someone Harry would typically consider someone he'd sorely miss, Neville was still close to Harry. Harry had taken on a mentor-like role with Neville, helping him whenever he asked and guiding him in improving his magical skills. This relationship, it seemed, had been enough for the tournament organizers to select Neville as Harry's hostage. With a swift cutting charm, Harry severed Neville's bindings. The ropes drifted away in the gentle current, dissolving into nothing, clearly enchanted to disappear once cut. Harry's eyes were drawn to Gabrielle, Fla's young sister. For a moment, he was tempted to rescue her as well. However, he was confident in Fla's abilities and knew she would arrive in time. Moreover, the rules of the competition prevented him from taking more than his own hostage. As a precaution, however, Harry secretly cast a monitoring charm on Gabrielle. The spell, invisible to the naked eye, would alert Harry instantly if the young girl's life was in any danger. Without spending any more time in the village, Harry grasped Neville firmly with one hand. Using the other, he created another powerful jet of water, propelling them both rapidly towards the surface. As they neared the surface, Harry could hear the muffled sounds of excitement from above. Clearly, their rapid return had been noticed. Movement on the lake. Bagman's voice boomed, audible even through the water. Something's coming up fast. This is too soon. Did something go wrong? It's Potter. And he's got his hostage. Unbelievable. It has only been around 5 minutes since the start of the task. Harry and Neville broke the surface with a splash, landing gracefully on another conjured ice platform. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers, their excitement palpable even across the expanse of the lake. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe what I'm seeing. Bagman was practically shouting now, his voice cracking with excitement. Hadrian Potter has completed the task in record time. And without even getting his hair wet, it seems. Indeed, Harry stood on his ice platform, looking as composed and dry as he had at the start of the task. Neville, on the other hand, was soaking wet and looking around in bewilderment, clearly trying to piece together what had happened. After ensuring Neville was safe with the medics, Harry calmly vanished all the ice he had created, leaving the lake's surface as pristine as it had been before the task began. And now Potter is tidying up after himself. Bagman sounded both amused and impressed. Well, I suppose when you make as grand an entrance and exit as that, you want to leave things neat and tidy. As the crowd continued to cheer and speculate wildly, Harry took a seat on the platform, seemingly content to wait for the other champions to return. His face betrayed no emotion, but his eyes remained fixed on the lake's surface, alert and watchful. "Folks, I've seen a lot in my time, but never anything quite like this," Bagman concluded, his voice filled with awe. "Hadrian Potter has not only completed the task in record time but has done so with a display of magic that, well, I'm not sure I have words for it. We'll just have to wait and see how the other champions fare, but I think it's safe to say that young Mr. Potter has set the bar incredibly high." As the excitement in the stands reached a fever pitch, Harry sat calmly, his eyes on the lake's surface, watching for any sign of disturbance or danger. Harry knew from experience that in events like these, particularly with the disguised Barty Crouch Jr. potentially interfering, trouble was almost inevitable. As he sat there, appearing to all the world as a confident champion basking in his victory, Harry was in fact poised and ready. Ready to dive back into those dark waters at a moment's notice, ready to face whatever challenges might arise, ready to save the day once again if needed. It was a role he was accustomed to, a responsibility he had shouldered many times before. The waiting game had begun, and Harry was determined to be prepared for whatever the Black Lake might still have in store. Chapter 254, Turbulent Waters. Fleur Delacour had been swimming through the murky depths of the Black Lake for what felt like an eternity. The icy water pressed against her skin despite the warming charms she had cast, a constant reminder of the perilous task at hand. It had been over 20 minutes since she plunged beneath the surface, yet there was still no sign of the Mer People's village or her precious sister, Gabrielle. The oppressive darkness of the lake seemed to close in around her, making each stroke a battle not only against the frigid water but also against her growing anxiety. As she swam, her thoughts drifted to Harry. His offer of help in navigating to the hostages echoed in her mind, a temptation she had stubbornly refused. Pride had won out over practicality, and now, with her muscles beginning to ache from the relentless exertion, a pang of doubt gnawed at her. Had her decision to go it alone been a mistake? The thought of Harry pushed her onward. He had probably already completed the task, she thought, a mix of admiration and frustration bubbling within her. Determination surged through her veins like fire, warming her against the lake's chill. She began to employ the propulsion technique Harry had taught her during their secret training sessions. Moving her wand in intricate patterns, she created jets of water that propelled her forward, her silvery hair streaming behind her like a banner. Suddenly, a melody reached her ears, the same eerie song from the Golden Egg. The haunting notes seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the water around her. Elation surged through Fleur, she was finally on the right track. But just as she turned to follow the sound, disaster struck with frightening swiftness. A swarm of grindylows erupted from a nearby patch of weeds, their spindly fingers grasping at her legs and arms. The water around her exploded with writhing green bodies, their sharp teeth bared in malicious grins. Panic threatened to overtake her at the sight of the sheer number of adversaries, but Fleur forced it down, Harry's calm voice echoing in her mind. "Remember," he had said during one of their nighttime training sessions, his green eyes intense in the moonlight, "Grindylows are strong, but brittle. A well-placed jinx will do the trick." With a series of silent incantations, Fleur sent jets of boiling water at the creatures. The spell caused the water around the Grindylows to heat up rapidly, creating pockets of near-boiling temperature. The creatures recoiled, their grip loosening just enough for her to break free. She didn't stop to celebrate her victory, knowing that every second counted. A few more precise spells sent the remaining Grindylows scattering, leaving only a cloud of disturbed silt in the water. As she swam onward, following the eerie song that grew stronger with each stroke, Fleur's mind raced. The encounter with the Grindylows had cost her precious time. She had no idea how much time had passed since the task had begun. What if she was too late? What if Gabrielle was hurt? The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the lake's frigid temperature. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of swimming through the oppressive darkness, Fleur reached the Mer People's village. The sight before her was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Crude stone dwellings loomed out of the gloom, their windows glowing with an eerie yellow light that cast long, shifting shadows across the underwater landscape. Though the village was not particularly dark, the tension of the task and Fleur's own anxiety colored her perception, making the scene seem menacing and alien. Mer people swam to and fro, their powerful tails propelling them effortlessly through the water. Their faces, so different from the romanticized depictions in fairy tales, were fierce and wild, their sharp teeth visible behind thin lips. And there, in the village square, was Gabrielle. Fla's heart leapt into her throat at the sight of her little sister, who floated pale and unmoving, tethered to a giant statue of a merperson. Fla's heart clenched, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was part of the task, she reminded herself. Gabrielle was safe, for now. As Fleur approached, she noticed only 3 hostages remained. Harry had indeed completed the task. A mixture of pride and annoyance welled up inside her. Of course he had. That was Harry, always one step ahead, always pushing the boundaries of what seemed possible. Just as Fleur reached Gabrielle and began working to free her, movement caught her eye. Charles Potter arrived, looking worse for wear. His robes were torn in several places, and trails of blood clouded the water around him, dissipating slowly in the gentle current. It seemed he too had faced challenges on his journey through the lake, perhaps even more harrowing than her encounter with the Grindylows. Charles swam towards the red-headed girl Ginny, Fleur recalled, and began cutting her free. As Fleur continued working on Gabrielle's bindings, she kept one eye on Charles, noting his frantic movements and wild eyes. Something had clearly rattled him during his journey through the lake. Just as Fleur was preparing to ascend with Gabrielle, another figure appeared, Victor Crumb, partially transfigured into a shark. His approach was swift and purposeful, heading straight for Hermione Granger, who was still bound to the statue. Fleur quickened her pace, determined not to lose her hard-earned second-place position. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, turning the once peaceful underwater scene into a chaotic battleground. The shark Crumb, driven by the instincts his partial transformation had awakened, caught the scent of Charles's blood in the water. He turned, his movement more curious than aggressive, but Charles, already on edge from his earlier encounters, misinterpreted the action as an attack. "Stupefy!" Charles yelled, his voice distorted by the bubblehead charm. A red jet of light shot from his wand, striking Crumb squarely in the side. The shark man recoiled, shaking his head as if to clear it. For a moment, it seemed as though the spell might have subdued him. Then, with a powerful swish of his tail, Crumb lunged forward, now genuinely angry. Within moments, the 2 champions were locked in a frantic underwater struggle. Fleur, clutching Gabrielle tightly to her chest, began backing away as fast as she could without attracting attention. She needed to get Gabrielle to safety. The battle between Charles and Crumb was escalating, and she feared it might soon turn truly dangerous. But before she could retreat, disaster struck again. A stray spell from Charles's wand, a severing charm meant for shark Crumb, struck one of the mer people, slicing deep into its arm. The creature's cry of pain echoed through the water, a haunting, otherworldly sound that sent shivers down Fla's spine. Suddenly, the entire village was in uproar. Spears were leveled at the champions and their hostages, the mer people's eyes flashing with anger. What had been a peaceful, if eerie, setting moments ago had transformed into a hostile war zone. The mer people, previously content to watch the task unfold, now saw the champions as threats to be eliminated. Fla's heart pounded as her thoughts raced, a whirlwind of fear and determination. She had to protect Gabrielle at all costs. The situation had spiraled out of control far beyond anything she had anticipated, and she knew the next few moments would be crucial. Where were the judges? They should be monitoring the situation, shouldn't they? Shouldn't they be intervening to prevent this chaos? Drawing her wand, Fleur prepared herself for battle. She cast a quick shield charm around herself and Gabrielle, then turned to face the advancing mer people. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Charles still grappling with the enraged Crumb, while Hermione floated helplessly, still bound to the statue. As the first merperson lunged forward, spear aimed at her chest, Fleur steeled herself. "Impedimenta!" she cried, her voice garbled by the water. The spell hit its mark, sending the merperson tumbling backward. But there were more coming, their faces contorted with rage. Fla's wand became a blur as she cast spell after spell, fighting to keep the mer people at bay while protecting Gabrielle. Stunning spells, impediment jinxes, and even a few well-placed confuse charms flew from her wand in rapid succession. She was thankful for all the underwater training with Harry, which was proving invaluable in this unexpected battle. Without that preparation, she might not have even made it past the Grindylows, let alone this far. The peaceful underwater task had turned into a dangerous melee, and the sheer number of mer people in the village was overwhelming. Fleur found herself surrounded on all sides, her shield charm flickering under the constant barrage of attacks. Thankfully, the mer people couldn't cast spells of their own. From what she knew about them, they were physically strong, skilled in underwater combat, and able to control underwater creatures and confuse with their songs, but casting spells was not one of their abilities. This fact alone ensured she wasn't quickly subdued in this fight. Still, the situation looked increasingly dire. For every merperson she managed to stun or drive back, 2 more seemed to take their place. Her arms ached from the constant spell casting, and she could feel her magic beginning to drain. Gabrielle, though still unconscious, was a heavy weight in her arms, making it difficult to maneuver. Through the dissipating spots in her vision, Fleur saw a bright silhouette cutting through the dark waters. The figure moved with impossible speed and grace, leaving a trail of stunned mer-people in its wake. Even before she could make out any details, Fleur knew in her heart who it was. A smile spread across her face despite the danger still surrounding them. Harry Potter had arrived, and Fleur knew that she and her sister were finally safe. Chapter 255, The Underwater Savior. Time rewound, and the clock's hands spun backward to a few minutes before chaos erupted underwater. Above the surface, the excitement that followed Harry's quick completion of the task had faded. For over 30 minutes, the Black Lake remained calm, offering no clue about the drama happening below. The spectators, who had come to see a spectacle, grew restless and annoyed. "This is rubbish!" someone yelled from the Gryffindor section of the stands. "We can't see anything." The complaint spread through the crowd, soon echoed by many others. Within moments, boos and jeers filled the air. It was clear that the organizers had made a major mistake by not providing a way for the audience to see the underwater action. Amidst the growing frustration, Harry Potter, who had been watching the lake calmly from his spot near the judges' table, suddenly stood up. His quick movement caught the attention of those nearby, including Ludo Bagman, who was struggling to keep the crowd entertained. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bagman announced, his voice sounding relieved to have something to comment on, "it appears Hadrian Potter is on the move again. Perhaps he's about to show us some extraordinary magic? Is he going to entertain the crowd and give us the show we've all been waiting for?" But Harry had no time for showmanship or explanations. The charm he had placed on Gabrielle had alerted him to danger, confirming the fears he'd had since the task began. He knew the trouble he anticipated had finally arrived, and he needed to act quickly to save her and the others. Without saying a word, Harry conjured another ice platform, to the amazement of the crowd. He sprinted up the icy steps and, without hesitation, dove back into the lake. "Incredible!" Bagman shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. "Potter has conjured another ice structure and is now— wait, is he? Yes, he's diving back into the lake. But why? Has something gone wrong underwater? The judges don't seem worried, so maybe Potter was just bored like the rest of us and decided to check on the progress of the task himself." Underwater, Harry used the same combination of the bubblehead charm and wandless propulsion to speed towards the mer-people's village. As he approached, the scene that greeted him was one of complete chaos, much worse than he had imagined. Charles Potter and a shark-headed crumb were locked in a frantic battle, their movements wild and dangerous. Their hostages, Hermione Granger and Ginny Weasley, were still tied to the statue, guarded by a group of aggressive mer-people. Off to one side, Fleur was desperately defending herself from another group of mer-warriors, trying to protect her sister. She was doing well, but Harry could see she was slowly being overwhelmed by their numbers. Harry's first priority was Fleur and Gabrielle. He had no time to make a detailed plan. Acting on instinct and years of training, Harry cast his Patronus. A massive, glowing thunderbird burst from his wand, its light so bright that it blinded every merperson near Fleur for a moment. Taking advantage of the confusion, Harry put away his wand and clenched his fists. Drawing on his mastery of wandless magic, he channeled his power until sparks of purple lightning danced around his hands. Then, using a modified flying technique he had developed for underwater movement, Harry rushed towards the group surrounding Fleur and her sister. What followed was a one-sided fight that would have amazed even the most battle-hardened warrior. Harry moved with incredible speed, his lightning-charged fists striking with perfect accuracy. Each hit sent shockwaves through the water, temporarily paralyzing his opponents. Within moments, all the mer-people surrounding Fleur were stunned and immobilized, floating helplessly in the water. Catching Fleur's eye, Harry urgently motioned for her to leave with Gabrielle. He mouthed, "Go. I'll handle this," and turned to face the larger group of angry mer-people who had come to replace their defeated comrades. The newcomers seemed torn between chasing Fleur and dealing with this new, clearly dangerous threat. Harry's earlier display of power had clearly intimidated them, and they hesitated, unsure whether to attack or retreat. This hesitation worked perfectly for Harry, as it gave him time to ensure Fleur and Gabrielle reached the surface safely. While keeping an eye on the mer people, he turned his attention to the ongoing battle between Charles and Crumb. The situation was getting worse. Charles was struggling, his movements becoming sluggish as the effects of the gillyweed began to wear off. Crumb, still partially transformed into a shark, seemed to be acting purely on instinct, his attacks becoming more erratic and dangerous. After confirming that Fleur and Gabrielle were safely out of the water, Harry decided it was time to end the chaos. He began channeling even more power into his hands. The purple lightning around his fists grew in intensity, lighting up the underwater battlefield with an eerie glow. The mer people watched in growing fear as Harry's power built to levels they had never seen before. Some began to back away, while others raised their weapons in a futile attempt to appear threatening. But Harry ignored them, focusing entirely on the task at hand. Once he had gathered enough power, Harry released it in a controlled burst. Sparks of lightning spread through the water in all directions, temporarily paralyzing everyone nearby including Charles, Crumb, and their hostages. This was exactly why Harry had waited for Fleur to be safely away before acting. He didn't want to accidentally hurt her or her sister. Taking advantage of the temporary calm, Harry quickly moved to Charles's side. With a wave of his hand, he cast a bubblehead charm on his struggling brother, ensuring he could breathe normally again. Then, with practiced efficiency, he freed the remaining two hostages from their bindings. The shock of Harry's lightning seemed to bring Crumb back to his senses. His shark features started to fade, and the wild look in his eyes was replaced by confusion and an understanding of what had happened. Harry urgently gestured for both Charles and Crumb to take their hostages and leave immediately. As they began their ascent, Harry positioned himself between them and the recovering mer people, acting as a living shield to make sure they got away safely. The group, realizing they couldn't help and trusting Harry, retreated quickly to the surface. As the last of them disappeared from view, Harry turned to face the mer warriors. Now free from the paralyzing effect of his lightning, they were furious. They advanced on Harry, their spears pointed at his chest, their faces twisted in rage. But Harry stood his ground, unflinching. Tendrils of purple lightning continued to radiate from his body, creating an intimidating aura that made even the bravest merperson hesitate. The message was clear: attack at your own risk. This tense standoff continued for what felt like forever, with neither side willing to make the first move. The mer people, despite their anger, were clearly afraid of this human who had powers beyond their understanding. Harry, for his part, didn't want to escalate the situation further. He had no desire to hurt an entire group of mer people and create a diplomatic problem that could have serious consequences. Just as it seemed like the standoff was about to reach a breaking point, a loud, screechy noise pierced the water. The mer people in front of Harry moved aside, creating a path for a fierce-looking female merperson who approached, flanked by two bodyguards. Harry instantly recognized her as the Merchieftainess, her regal presence unmistakable even in the murky water. The Merchieftainess's eyes blazed with fury as she spoke to Harry, her voice an eerie mix of anger and melody. "Human!" she screeched, her voice distorted by the water but no less fierce. "Dumbledore has broken our agreement. My people have been hurt in this foolish game of yours. We demand compensation for this outrage." Harry stayed calm and replied, "I understand your anger, but you should take this up with Dumbledore. I'm only here to make sure the champions and hostages are safe. I have no intention of making things worse." The Merchieftainess's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just leave after hurting my people? No, human. You will face consequences for your actions." But even as she spoke, a calculating look appeared in her eyes. She had seen Harry's power, and it was clear that a direct fight would likely end badly for her people. But she couldn't let this insult go unpunished. As their leader, she needed to demand some form of retribution. After a moment of silence, the Merchieftainess made an unexpected suggestion. "Let us settle this our way, human. You will fight my two strongest warriors, without using magic. If you win, we will consider the matter closed, and you may leave in peace. If not..." She left the thread hanging between them, the meaning clear. A smile crossed Harry's lips. He understood the chief's attempt to exploit what she thought was a wizard's physical weakness. Little did she know that Harry was far from an average wizard. His body had been strengthened by years of intense night training. "I accept your challenge," Harry said, his voice carrying a hint of excitement that seemed to catch the Merchieftainess off guard. "Let's settle this now." Surprise flickered across the Merchieftainess's face, quickly replaced by smug satisfaction. She gave orders, and the surrounding mer people moved away, creating a large circular arena. Harry found himself facing two imposing warriors, their muscular bodies ready for battle. Without any warning, the warriors sprang into action. They swam with incredible speed, circling Harry like sharks closing in on prey. Their movements were fluid and well practiced, clearly suited for underwater combat. But Harry stayed calm, his eyes following their movements easily. Their speed, though impressive, was not enough to intimidate him. Wanting to end the fight quickly so he could get back to the surface where his friends were surely worried, Harry deliberately left an opening in his defense. The warriors saw their chance and rushed in, their powerful tails propelling them forward. But at the last moment, Harry pivoted with lightning-fast reflexes. His fist struck both attackers at the same time, sending them flying backward through the water. They tumbled head over tail, stunned by the unexpected strength of his blows. The watching mer people gasped, at least, the underwater equivalent of a gasp, clearly shocked by this. The merchifteness's smug expression turned to one of concern and growing respect. Realizing they were facing a much stronger opponent than expected, the warriors regrouped quickly. They grabbed spears that were handed to them by the crowd. Although this wasn't part of the original agreement, Harry's smile didn't fade. He welcomed the challenge, his body ready. What followed was a stunning display of underwater combat that left even the most experienced mer warriors in awe. Harry dodged and weaved between the spears with skill, his movements fluid and precise. He used the resistance of the water to his advantage, allowing it to slow the spears just enough to make them easier to avoid. The mer people watched in stunned silence as Harry effortlessly evaded their best warriors in their own environment. It was a show of skill and physical ability that defied their understanding of surface dwellers. After allowing the fight to go on for a while, partly to give the warriors a fair chance and partly because he was enjoying the challenge, Harry decided it was time to end it. He knew Fleur and his friends above would be worried about how long he was taking, and he didn't want to stress them out. In a blur of motion that the spectators could barely follow, Harry disarmed one of the warriors, grabbing his spear in one smooth movement. With the weapon in hand, he quickly defeated his opponents. His strikes were powerful and precise, targeting pressure points that were just as effective on mer people as on humans. Within moments, both warriors were floating in the water, disarmed and beaten. They were still conscious but made no move to continue, recognizing they were completely outmatched. As the defeated warriors sank to the lake bed, Harry turned to the merchifteness with a proud smile. "Is that enough, or do you have more challenges for me?" he asked, his tone light but with an edge. The merchifteness looked at Harry with a mix of respect and caution. It was clear she was rethinking everything she knew about this young human. After a moment of silence, she spoke, her voice sounding resigned. "You may leave, human," she said grudgingly. "There will be no bad blood between us. In fact," she added, a calculating look in her eyes, "consider yourself a friend of the mer people. You are welcome in our waters if you wish to return." Harry, recognizing the political maneuvering, simply nodded. He knew she was more interested in avoiding a powerful enemy than gaining a true friend, but he appreciated the gesture. In the world of magical politics, alliances like this, even if made out of convenience, could be valuable. With a final nod to the mer people, Harry prepared to leave. Then, in a display of wandless magic more powerful than anything he'd shown before, he propelled himself upward at incredible speed, leaving behind a group of stunned mer people and a story that would be told in the depths of the Black Lake for generations. Chapter 256, The Surface Eruption. The surface of the Black Lake erupted in a series of dramatic splashes as Fleur Delacour, with her sister Gabrielle clutched tightly in her arms, emerged from the murky depths. The crowd, which had grown increasingly restless during the long wait, erupted into thunderous cheers. Their earlier boredom was instantly forgotten in the excitement of the moment, replaced by a palpable energy that electrified the air. Ludo Bagman's magically amplified voice boomed across the lake, cutting through the cheers and applause. "Ladies and gentlemen, the second champion has returned with her hostage. It's Fleur Delacour of Beaux Batons, and just in time too. Only 2 minutes remain before the 1-hour time limit expires." As Bagman's words echoed across the grounds, a team of medi-wizards rushed forward to help Fleur and Gabrielle. Fleur looked exhausted, her usual grace replaced by trembling limbs as she struggled to swim the last few meters to shore. The toll of her underwater ordeal was evident in every labored movement. Just as Fleur and Gabrielle were helped onto the platform, the lake's surface churned once more. Victor Crumb surfaced with a powerful surge, towing a spluttering Hermione Granger behind him. The Bulgarian champion's partial shark transformation had receded, leaving him fully human again. Seconds later, Charles Potter broke the surface, supporting a coughing Ginny Weasley. Bagman's voice rang out again, excitement coloring his every word. The third and fourth champions have finally arrived. Victor Krum claims third place, with Charles Potter right behind him in fourth. Unfortunately, they've both exceeded the time limit by a few minutes, which will cost them some valuable points. Nevertheless, let's give them a round of applause for completing this challenging task. The crowd's cheers swelled as all the champions and hostages were finally accounted for. The air was filled with relief and celebration. However, the joyful atmosphere didn't last long. Fleur, after making sure her sister was in the care of the Medi-Wizards, suddenly turned back towards the lake. Her face, which had been filled with relief, now twisted with panic. "Ari!" she shouted, her voice hoarse and urgent, silencing the nearby crowd. "Ari is still down there." Her words sent a ripple of confusion through the crowd. Murmurs and worried whispers replaced the cheers as people tried to understand what was happening. Even Bagman's usually confident commentary faltered. What's this? It seems Hadrian Potter is still in the lake? But he was the first to finish the task. What could be keeping our champion?" Ignoring the offers of blankets and pepper-up potion from the Medi-Wizards, Fleur rushed towards the judge's table. Her silver hair, usually so perfectly styled, was now a tangled mess, and her eyes were wide with worry. "Professors!" she cried, her accent thicker in her distress. "You must do something. Ari is fighting the Mer people. His intervention allowed us three to come up. He saved us all." Dumbledore rose from his seat. "Miss Delacour," he said, his voice calm but urgent, "please, try to calm yourself. Tell us exactly what happened down there." As the other champions were being treated by the medical staff, Fleur quickly recounted the chaos in the Mer people's village. She described the battle between Charles and Krum, the accident that had angered the Mer people, and how Harry had arrived just in time to save them all from a potentially disastrous situation. "He defeated the group surrounding my sister and me," Fleur explained, her hands gesturing wildly. "He told me to take Gabrielle and go, that he would handle everything. But there were so many of them. The entire village was in an uproar." The judges exchanged worried looks as they listened. Madame Maxime placed a comforting hand on her champion's shoulder, while Dumbledore's brow furrowed in thought. "Don't worry, Miss Delacour," he said, his voice reassuring. "I will speak with the Merchifteness and resolve this. We will make sure Mr. Potter returns safely." Before Dumbledore could finish, the lake's surface exploded again. This time, it was no ordinary splash. A figure shot out of the water like a missile, surrounded by a swirling vortex. The crowd gasped as Harry Potter arced through the air, his body twisting gracefully before landing with cat-like precision on the judge's platform. Water cascaded off him as he stood up, not a hair out of place. His eyes, bright with excitement, scanned the crowd before settling on the stunned faces of the judges. "Sorry for the delay," Harry said with a roguish grin, sounding as casual as if he'd just returned from a walk instead of an underwater battle. "I had some diplomatic matters to attend to." The silence that had fallen over the crowd at his dramatic entrance shattered into cheers, whoops, and applause. The sound was so deafening it seemed to shake the air. Bagman's voice, when he finally found it, was filled with excitement and awe. "Unbelievable! Simply unbelievable!" he shouted, barely audible over the crowd. "Hadrian Potter returns in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Whatever was holding him up seems to have been thoroughly dealt with." Fleur, her face filled with relief, ran forward. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around Harry, hugging him fiercely. "Harry!" she exclaimed, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "You're safe. I was so worried." Harry hugged her back, his voice soft and reassuring. "I told you I'd handle it, didn't I? It was a walk in the park, really. Nothing to worry about." What happened next took everyone, including Harry, by surprise. Fleur pulled back slightly, then, in front of the entire crowd, cupped Harry's face in her hands and kissed him deeply. The crowd fell silent for a split second, as if the world itself had paused to witness the moment. Then, as realization set in, the crowd erupted in gasps, whispers, and a few good-natured cheers. As they broke apart, Harry's eyes were wide with surprise, a faint blush on his cheeks. Recovering quickly, he quipped, "Well, this is certainly a first. I've never been rewarded like this for saving the day at Hogwarts. I must say, I rather like it. Everyone else, take notes, but I'm afraid I take rewards from girls only. Fleur blushed slightly at his words, while the crowd reacted with a mix of cheers and jeers. Taking advantage of the commotion, Fleur leaned in close, her lips barely moving as she whispered through their mental link. If you even think about kissing other girls, I'll... Harry's mental reply was quick, tinged with amusement and affection. No need for threats, Monday Cherie. This was just to keep our secret safe. I wouldn't dream of kissing anyone else. Why would I, when I have the best right here? They separated quickly, aware of the many eyes on them. The other champions, now recovered from their ordeals, approached Harry with a mix of awe and gratitude. Victor Crumb stepped forward first, extending his hand in respect and thanks. Potter, he said, his voice gruff but sincere, you really saved us down there. I owe you one. Harry shook Crumb's hand firmly, a smile on his lips. Think nothing of it, Victor. Accidents happen, especially at Hogwarts, though I must admit, this one was more exciting than most. I'm just glad everyone's safe. Before the conversation could continue, Dumbledore cleared his throat, bringing the focus back to the matter at hand. Mr. Potter, while we are all relieved to see you safe, I believe you owe us an explanation. What exactly happened in the Mer People's village? Harry's expression turned serious. Nothing out of the ordinary, really just the usual fights and day saving that seem to be a habit around here. His tone then took on a more pointed edge. Though I have to ask, professors, did you have no safety measures in place? No monitoring charms to ensure everything was going as planned? The headmasters of the three schools looked taken aback by Harry's direct questioning. Before they could respond, Harry continued, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Never mind. If you haven't learned after all these years, I doubt you ever will. You should probably prepare for a diplomatic visit from the Mer people. They have some strong words about today's events, words I'd be interested to hear in Mermish, I must say. As the judges absorbed Harry's words, their expressions a mix of chagrin and concern, the lake's surface rippled again. Several Mer people emerged, including the imposing figure of the Mer Chieftainess. Seeing this, Dumbledore and the other judges quickly excused themselves, moving to meet the clearly upset delegation. Greetings, Dumbledore said in Mermish, his tone conciliatory. We must express our deepest apologies for the disturbance caused in your village. The Mer Chieftainess's expression was stern, her yellow eyes flashing with barely contained anger as she replied. Her voice, harsh above water, carried clearly to those nearby. Your champions brought chaos to our home, Dumbledore. This was not part of our agreement. The Shark Man and the Young One fought like beasts, endangering our people and disturbing our peace. Dumbledore's expression was grave as he responded. We are truly sorry for this unfortunate turn of events. We will send our best healers to care for anyone injured. Karkaroff, his dark eyes narrowed with suspicion, interrupted, what of Hadrian Potter? What role did he play in this mess? At the mention of Harry's name, the Mer Chieftainess's features softened slightly, surprising the assembled wizards. Ah, so that is the warrior's name. The one you call Hadrian Potter brought order to the chaos your other champions created. He protected the hostages and calmed the waters, showing both great power and admirable restraint. You should be thanking him. Without his intervention, your champions might not have returned as they did. My people are angry, but it could have been much worse. Karkaroff scowled at the praise of Harry, his voice dripping with disdain as he spoke. Surely Potter's interference was against the rules of the tournament? He had already completed his task and had no business returning to the village. The Mer Chieftainess turned her piercing yellow gaze to Karkaroff, her voice sharp. Without his intervention, blood would have been spilled this day. In our waters, such actions are honored, not punished. Your rules mean little when lives are at stake. Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully, stroking his long beard. Thank you for your honesty. We apologize again for the disturbance caused to your village and your people. Is there any way we can make amends for this incident? The Mer Chieftainess conferred briefly with her companions, their harsh whispers creating an eerie melody that made the nearby humans uneasy. After a moment, she turned back to Dumbledore, her expression serious. Give me until nightfall to discuss this with my people. Remember, Dumbledore, my people were hurt in one of your games. We will require proper compensation, or this could escalate into something much more serious. Dumbledore inclined his head. Of course. Take all the time you need. We await your decision and are prepared to offer fair compensation for the trouble we have caused. As the Mer people disappeared beneath the waves, the judges exchanged significant looks. Ludo Bagman, who had been listening intently, let out a low whistle. "Well," he said, his voice unusually subdued, "it seems young Mr. Potter has made quite an impression, both above and below the water. This tournament is certainly turning into one for the history books." Madame Maxime nodded, her large, handsome face showing concern. "Indeed. And it seems the other champions don't stand a chance against him. His abilities are formidable." With this new information to consider, the judges returned to their table to finalize their scores. The crowd, sensing that decisions were being made, fell into an expectant hush. Ludo Bagman's voice boomed across the lake again. "Ladies and gentlemen, the judges have reached their decisions. The points for the second task will now be announced." The crowd in the stands grew silent as Bagman began to read out the scores. "In fourth place, Victor Crumb," Bagman announced, his voice carrying a note of regret. While Mr. Crumb showed impressive transfiguration skills with his partial shark transformation, his altercation with Mr. Charles Potter and the chaos that followed in the Mer People's Village have resulted in a score of 25 points. Karkaroff's face twisted with fury, but the other judges nodded in agreement. Crumb accepted the score with a stoic nod, seeming to understand the reasons behind it. "In third place, Charles Potter," Bagman continued. "Despite facing numerous challenges and showing bravery, Mr. Potter's actions contributed to the disturbance in the Mer People's Village. Taking this into account, he is awarded 30 points. Charles nodded glumly, accepting the score as fair given the circumstances. "In second place, Fleur Delacour," Bagman announced, his voice brightening slightly. "Miss Delacour demonstrated excellent charm work and commendable bravery in protecting her hostage. However, she needed assistance to complete the task. Taking all factors into consideration, she is awarded 42 points. Fleur accepted the score with grace, though a flicker of disappointment crossed her face. Her schoolmates from Beaux Batons applauded, proud of their champion. And in first place, Bagman's voice rose dramatically, building suspense, with a perfect score of 50 points, Hadrian Potter. The crowd erupted into cheers so loud it seemed to shake the ground. Bagman had to wait for the noise to die down before continuing. Mr. Potter not only completed the task in record time but also returned to ensure the safety of his fellow champions and their hostages. His extraordinary display of magic, quick thinking in a crisis, and diplomatic skills in dealing with the Mer people have earned him top marks from all judges. As the applause began to fade, Dumbledore stepped forward to address the crowd, his voice magically amplified to carry across the grounds. "This task has shown us the importance of not just individual achievement, but also of cooperation and heroism in the face of unexpected dangers. Mr. Hadrian Potter's actions today embody the true spirit of the Triwizard Tournament. Let us all learn from his example of courage, skill, and compassion." With the official proceedings over, the crowd began to disperse, excitedly discussing the day's events. Harry once again found himself at the center of attention, surrounded by admirers and well-wishers. But this time, it didn't bother him as much as it once might have. Harry had grown used to the spotlight, though he still preferred the quiet company of his close friends and allies. Chapter 257, Interlude, A Breath Before the Storm. The days following the second task brought a whirlwind of changes to Hogwarts, with the aftermath of the underwater drama still echoing through the castle's old halls. As part of the compensation negotiated by Fleur with the headmasters for putting her sister in danger, young Gabrielle Delacour was given a special privilege, permission to stay at Hogwarts for a few days before her parents arrived to take her home. Gabrielle, still in awe from her underwater adventure, stuck to Harry like glue. To her, he was the knight in shining armor straight out of her favorite fairy tales, the hero who had saved her and her sister from danger. Her excitement was contagious, and Harry found himself enjoying her company, especially since she often spilled Fla's secrets in rapid French. "Did you know," Gabrielle whispered conspiratorially one afternoon, her blue eyes wide with excitement, "that after you beat her in the tournament, Fleur couldn't stop talking about you? She tracked every bit of news about you she could find. She even had a scrapbook." Harry, fluent in French thanks to years of preparation, couldn't help but grin at this revelation. He glanced at Fleur, who was walking alongside them, trying her best to look indifferent but failing miserably to hide the blush creeping up her cheeks. "Is that so?" Harry replied in French, his eyes twinkling with mischief and affection. "I had no idea I made such a lasting impression. A scrapbook, you say? How intriguing." Fleur, embarrassed, tried to silence her sister. "Gabby. That's enough. You shouldn't be telling Harry such things. They're private. But Gabrielle, ever the mischievous little sister and clearly loving her role as informant, giggled and darted behind Harry for protection. But it's true. You were his biggest fan, even if you didn't want to admit it. She spent hours reading about your duels and your techniques, Harry. Harry couldn't help but laugh at Fla's expression, a mix of embarrassment and affection. These moments, seeing Fla's usually composed demeanor falter because of her sister's teasing, were priceless to him. The 4 days with Gabrielle flew by in a blur of laughter and adventure, each moment more magical than the last. Harry, touched by the young girl's enthusiasm and determined to make her stay unforgettable, took it upon himself to show Gabrielle all the wonders Hogwarts had to offer. He pulled out all the stops, using his extensive knowledge of the castle and his considerable magical skills to create a series of enchanting experiences for her. One afternoon, to Gabrielle's utter delight, Harry enchanted a group of suits of armor to perform an elaborate dance routine in the corridors. The sight of the usually stoic metal figures twirling and spinning had Gabrielle in fits of giggles, and it even drew a crowd of amused students. Another day, Harry convinced the house elves to put on a miniature circus in the kitchens. The eager-to-please creatures juggled fruits, performed acrobatics with pots and pans, and even staged a comical cooking competition that left Gabrielle clapping with joy and the kitchen in cheerful chaos. Perhaps the most memorable experience was the special tour of the Olary that Harry arranged. Gabrielle got to feed treats to dozens of magical birds, from tiny scops owls to majestic eagle owls. She was in awe as Harry showed her how to attach a letter and send an owl on its way, her eyes wide with wonder as she watched the birds soar off into the distance. As Gabrielle's stay came to an end, her love for Hogwarts had only grown. On her last evening, as they sat in the Ravenclaw common room surrounded by Harry's friends who had grown fond of the lively young girl, Gabrielle declared with a mix of excitement and sadness, "I want to stay forever. It's so boring at home. No magic, no adventures, no Harry." The goodbye the next morning was bittersweet. Harry, Fleur, and a small group of students who had been charmed by Gabrielle's infectious personality gathered to see her off. As Gabrielle hugged Harry tightly, she whispered one last secret in his ear, her voice filled with the solemn importance only a child could muster. "Fleur writes your name in her diary with little hearts around it." With Gabrielle's departure, Harry and Fleur found themselves at a crossroads. The excuse of spending time together for Gabrielle's sake was gone, yet neither wanted to return to stolen moments and secret meetings. To Harry's surprise and delight, Fleur seemed more relaxed about being seen with him in public, no longer worried about maintaining a facade of rivalry. "Madame Maxime has adjusted her expectations," Fleur explained one balmy evening as they strolled hand in hand by the lake, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the water. "She believes no one stands a chance against you in the tournament, so she's encouraging me to learn from you instead. She thinks an alliance with you could be beneficial for both batons." This shift in dynamics allowed Harry to fully bring Fleur into his circle of friends. Cedric, Arabella, and the others welcomed her warmly, impressed by her wit and charm. As the days passed, the Hogwarts rumor mill went into overdrive, wildly speculating about the nature of Harry and Fla's relationship. Theories ranged from a purely strategic alliance to a secret engagement, with every possibility in between being debated in common rooms and corridors. Finally, during a particularly rowdy game of exploding snap in their usual hangout spot, Roger blurted out the question that had been on everyone's minds. "All right, mate, spill it," he said, eyeing Harry and Fleur with curiosity and exasperation. "What's really going on between you two? The suspense is killing us." Harry, catching Fla's eye and receiving a slight nod of approval, grinned broadly. "Well, if you must know," he said, pausing for dramatic effect, "we're together. Have been for a while now, actually." The revelation was met with a mix of cheers, good-natured teasing, and more than a few exchanged galleons as bets were settled. The room buzzed with excitement as their friends peppered them with questions about how it all began. While Harry and Fleur enjoyed their newfound openness and the simple pleasure of being able to walk hand in hand through the castle, not everyone at Hogwarts was having such a pleasant time. Hermione, in particular, found herself in the middle of a nasty media storm. Rita Skeeter's articles, growing more sensational by the day, painted her as a manipulative heartbreaker, playing with both Charles Potter and Victor Crumb's affections for her own gain. The backlash was swift and cruel. Hate mail poured in by the dozens, some even containing nasty hexes that left Hermione in tears more than once. Hagrid, too, was struggling after Skeeter's expose about his giant heritage. His classes had become subdued, with many students treating him with a mix of fear and distrust. The once cheerful gamekeeper now moved about the castle like a shadow of his former self, his usual enthusiasm dampened by the cruel whispers that followed him. The Golden Trio did their best to cheer him up, but despite their efforts, Hagrid remained downcast, the sparkle gone from his beetle-black eyes. Harry, due to his own commitments, wasn't fully aware of what was happening at Hogwarts. Otherwise, he would have offered to help Hagrid through this difficult time. But with his study load and a certain French which occupying his time, Harry had little opportunity to take care of other matters around the castle. Skeeter had, however, managed to keep her quill away from Harry's affairs. The threat of Azkaban seemed to have worked, and she kept her distance from Harry. This didn't stop her from targeting others, but at least Harry and his friends were spared her venomous writing. As May drew to a close, Harry settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent in classes or working on his apprenticeship duties with Professor Flitwick. Afternoons were dedicated to training, pushing his magical and physical limits even further. Evenings were a mix of study sessions with his friends and quiet moments with Fleur, often spent by the lake or in hidden corners of the castle. Despite the looming third task, Harry felt more at peace than he had in years. His relationship with Fleur brought warmth and joy to his life that he hadn't realized he was missing. His friendships were stronger than ever, and his magical abilities continued to grow by leaps and bounds, each day bringing new discoveries and mastery of complex spells. Yet, as the final week of May arrived, a sense of anticipation began to build within Harry. The third task was approaching quickly, and with it, the potential confrontation with Voldemort that Harry had been preparing for all year. He had contingency plans in place for various scenarios, knowing that the absence of the polyjuiced Barty Crouch Jr. as Moody meant things could unfold differently than in the books. As he lay in bed on the night of May 26, the night before they would learn about the third task, Harry's mind raced with possibilities. He was confident in his abilities, certain that he could handle whatever Voldemort might throw at him. But there was also a thrill of excitement running through him. The thought of finally confronting the Dark Lord in his own body was both intimidating and exhilarating. Harry knew that facing Voldemort when he had been just a parasite on Quirrell's head had been easy compared to what was coming. This would be the real test, a chance to match his skills against the Dark Lord at full strength. Despite the gravity of the situation, part of Harry looked forward to proving that he had surpassed Voldemort in power and skill. Even so, Harry found himself struggling with a moral dilemma. He had the power, the knowledge, and the means to end the war before it even started. If he told Sirius and Amelia about Voldemort's imminent return, he was sure that, with their help and his own abilities, they could set a trap that would finish the Dark Lord once and for all. But something held him back. He wasn't convinced that killing Voldemort right away was the best move. Harry had a broader perspective, one that looked beyond the immediate threat of Voldemort. He could see many future conflicts, not just in the wizarding world but with the Muggle world as well. Before dealing with those larger threats, Harry wanted to cleanse the British wizarding world of the corruption and complacency that had allowed someone like Voldemort to rise in the first place. He wanted to make sure the wizarding world moved in the right direction, becoming stronger and more united before facing these future challenges. This internal conflict made it hard for Harry to make a decision. He knew the fine line between strategic planning and manipulating events for the greater good, as Dumbledore had done. Harry was determined not to become like the headmaster pulling strings from behind the scenes without regard for individual lives. This determination complicated his choices. After much thought, Harry decided to let events unfold naturally, at least for now. He would face Voldemort alone, using all his power to fight the Dark Lord personally. If, by some twist of fate, Voldemort managed to escape, Harry thought it wouldn't be the end of the world. By not involving outside help, Harry was offering Voldemort a final chance at a fair confrontation, a decision that didn't sit comfortably with him, but one he felt was necessary to avoid becoming the very thing he opposed. Harry imagined two possible scenarios. If Voldemort fell by his hand, then Harry would need to quickly turn his focus to battling the entrenched corruption within the Ministry and other institutions. But if Voldemort survived and war broke out, Harry was determined to use the conflict as an opportunity for change, making sure that the wizarding world that emerged from the ashes would be stronger, fairer, and better prepared for future challenges. This middle ground approach wasn't perfect, and Harry knew it had its flaws. If Voldemort escaped even after Harry did his best, he could accept it as fate's handiwork. Harry understood that this decision still put him in a position of manipulating events, but he vowed to ensure that any conflict would be as short and contained as possible, minimizing casualties. Harry held on to one key difference between himself and Dumbledore. While he might not be perfect, he was committed to being a strategist, not a puppet master. He would make decisions and take actions openly, accepting the consequences and adjusting his course as needed, rather than secretly controlling events from the shadows. As sleep finally began to take him, Harry's last thoughts were of the future. He hoped to build a future where the wizarding world wasn't held back by outdated beliefs and prejudices, where magical beings of all kinds could live in harmony, and where the threat of dark wizards rising to power was a thing of the past. With these ambitious goals in mind, Harry drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever the coming days would bring. Chapter 258, The Third Task Revealed. As the sun dipped below the horizon on May 27, casting long shadows across the Hogwarts grounds, Harry Potter made his way toward the Quidditch pitch. The air was crisp with the lingering chill of spring, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. The anticipation in the air was almost tangible. Tonight, the champions would finally learn what the third and final task of the Triwizard Tournament would be. As Harry approached the pitch, he spotted a familiar figure walking alone in the same direction. It was Charles, his younger brother, who seemed lost in thought. By coincidence, they both arrived at the castle exit at the same time. "Evening, Charles," Harry greeted, not wanting to seem rude by ignoring his brother. His voice, though friendly, carried a hint of the awkwardness that often marked their interactions. Charles started slightly, as if pulled from deep thought. "Oh, hi, Harry," he replied, sounding a bit surprised and unsure. It was rare for the brothers to find themselves alone together, and neither seemed to know quite how to handle it. After a moment of silence, broken only by the sound of their footsteps, Charles cleared his throat. "So, what do you think the third task is going to be?" he asked, clearly grasping for a topic. Harry thought for a moment before responding. "It's hard to say for sure. These tasks are meant to be unpredictable. But if I had to guess, I'd say it will test our magical abilities and problem-solving skills overall." Charles nodded, seeming relieved to have something concrete to discuss. "That makes sense. Actually, Hermione mentioned that Krum said something about finding a treasure in dark tunnels. Do you think that could be it? Like an underground maze or something?" A small smile tugged at Harry's lips, a mix of amusement and knowing. "You're not far off, but I don't think it'll be tunnels exactly. And as for what it is going to be..." He trailed off, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Let's just say you might not be too happy with what they've done to the Quidditch pitch." Charles's brow furrowed, concern crossing his features. But before he could ask for more details, they turned the corner, and the Quidditch pitch came into view. Charles stopped dead in his tracks, his mouth falling open in shock. "What have they done to it?" he exclaimed, his voice rising in disbelief. The once smooth and flat Quidditch field, a sacred place for players and fans, was now unrecognizable. A maze of low walls twisted and turned across the pitch, transforming the familiar landscape into something strange and daunting. The pristine grass that had hosted countless matches was now interrupted by the intricate pattern of the maze. Harry bent down to examine the nearest wall, his curiosity piqued. "They're hedges," he said, running his hand over the rough foliage. The leaves were small and packed tightly, promising to grow into thick barriers. "Looks like they're just starting to grow. Give them a bit of time and some magic, and they'll be towering over us." Before Charles could voice any further complaints, a cheerful voice called out from the center of the transformed pitch. "Hello there!" Ludo Bagman stood waving energetically, his face beaming. Beside him were Krum and Fleur, both looking at the maze with curiosity and a bit of apprehension. Harry walked over to stand beside Fleur, giving her a warm smile, which she returned with a subtle wink. Charles, still looking annoyed, moved to stand next to Krum, whispering his grievances about the pitch's transformation, to which the Bulgarian seeker nodded in agreement. "Well, what do you think?" Bagman asked happily as Harry and Charles joined the group. "Growing nicely, aren't they? Give them a month and Hagrid will have them 20 feet high. Don't worry," he added hastily, noticing the concerned expressions on some of the champions' faces, "you'll have your Quidditch field back to normal once the task is over. Now, I imagine you can guess what we're making here." There was a moment of silence as the champions surveyed the transformed pitch. Then Krum, in his usual gruff manner, grunted, "Maze." "That's right!" Bagman exclaimed, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "A maze. The third task's really very straightforward. The Triwizard Cup will be placed in the center of the maze. The first champion to touch it will receive full marks." Fleur tilted her head, her silvery hair catching the moonlight. "We just have to get through the maze?" she asked, her tone suggesting she suspected it wasn't that simple. Bagman's grin widened. "There will be obstacles," he said, his voice filled with barely contained excitement. "Hagrid is providing a number of creatures, then there will be spells that must be broken, all that sort of thing, you know. Now, the champions who are leading on points will get a head start into the maze." He smiled at Harry, who remained calm. "So it'll be Mr. Potter first, then Miss Delacour, then the younger Mr. Potter, and finally Mr. Krum. But you'll all be in with a fighting chance, depending on how well you get past the obstacles. Should be fun, eh?" Harry and Charles had a weird look on their faces. They were both well aware that Hagrid's idea of fun often involved dangerous creatures that most people would go out of their way to avoid. The thought of facing Hagrid's obstacles brought a mix of excitement and worry to Charles. "Very well," Bagman continued, rubbing his hands together as if to ward off the evening chill. "If you haven't got any questions, we'll go back up to the castle, shall we? It's a bit chilly." Harry raised his hand, catching Bagman's attention. "The first to the cup gets full marks, so does that mean even if I don't reach the cup first, I still have a chance to win the tournament?" Bagman's cheerful expression wavered a bit. "Yes, Mr. Potter. The first person will get the full 50 points. For the other places, the judges will score based on how well each champion did in the maze, and the one with the most total points will win the tournament and be crowned Triwizard Champion. So the other champions have a big task ahead to beat you, Mr. Potter. Your lead will be hard to overcome." As Bagman spoke, his enthusiasm seemed to fade, replaced by a hint of gloom. Unknown to the champions, except for Harry of course, Bagman was silently worrying about losing his bet with the goblins. With Charles in third place, the odds of him winning were slim, and Bagman was already thinking of ways to avoid the goblins' anger. Meanwhile, the goblins were growing excited, anticipating Harry's likely victory. Harry nodded, processing this information. He was a bit surprised to learn that points would still matter in the final task. He had assumed that whoever reached the cup first would be the winner. This brought some relief. Even if something prevented him from reaching the cup first, his lead in points gave him a strong chance of winning. As Bagman wished them good night and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the evening stillness, the champions began to head back. Harry and Fleur naturally moved toward each other, while Krum and Charles headed toward the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Harry leaned in close to Fleur, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "Looks like Krum wants to have a private word with Charles. Want to follow?" His voice held a hint of mischief. Fleur giggled softly, her eyes sparkling with amusement. "I know what they are going to talk about. Hermione Granger." "Ah, love and its complications," she said, her accent thicker in the quiet intimacy of the moment. "Good thing we have everything sorted, Non? We should let them figure it out. Some things are better worked out privately." As they walked back towards the castle, Harry and Fleur fell into easy conversation, talking about the upcoming task. Their words were a mix of strategy and playful banter, the seriousness of the tournament balanced by the happiness they found in each other's company. "With Hagrid in charge of the obstacles, be ready for some excitement. Knowing him, we might be facing anything from blast-ended Skrewts to a herd of angry hippogriffs," Harry said with a grin. Fleur shuddered. "I hope not those Skrewts. They are, how you say, not very charming." She wrinkled her nose, making Harry laugh. As Harry and Fleur made their way back to the castle, lost in conversation and each other's company, they had no idea they were missing a crucial moment. By choosing romance over curiosity, Harry had missed an important opportunity. The chance to intercept Voldemort's plan, to stop the Dark Wizard's schemes before they could fully take shape, slipped away along with Krum and Charles. Years later, Harry would look back on this evening with a wry smile and a shake of his head. He would joke about how his eagerness to be with Fleur had caused him to overlook a turning point, perhaps even the chance to end Voldemort's threat before it escalated. While the night's events didn't lead to a disaster that Harry couldn't handle, they served as a lasting reminder, even the smallest moments can carry the weight of great consequences. And though Harry might have missed an opportunity that night, he had no regrets about choosing love, knowing that those choices made him who he was, both a fierce protector and someone who cherished the people closest to him. Chapter 259, The Forbidden Forest Encounter. The Forbidden Forest loomed dark and intimidating as Charles Potter and Victor Krum made their way deeper into its shadows. The air seemed thick with tension, and the usual nighttime sounds of the forest were muted, as if nature itself was holding its breath. "Why are we going this way?" Charles asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and nervousness as they passed Hagrid's cabin and the brightly lit Beauxbatons carriage. Krum's response was short, his accent thicker than usual, showing his own unease. Don't want to be overheard. His eyes scanned the darkness around them, as if expecting someone to jump out of the shadows. They continued in silence, the soft crunch of leaves and twigs under their feet the only sound breaking the eerie quiet. The forest seemed to close in on them, branches reaching out like twisted fingers in the dim light of their wands. Eventually, they reached a quiet clearing just beyond the paddock where the massive Beauxbatons horses grazed. The huge animals were barely visible in the darkness, moving like shadows as they munched on the grass. Crumb stopped suddenly in the shade of the trees, turning to face Charles with an intensity that made Charles take an involuntary step back. The Bulgarian's face was serious, his dark eyes staring into Charles's with an almost physical force. I want to know, Crumb said, his brow furrowed, casting shadows across his face in the wan light, what is between you and Hermione? Charles blinked, stunned by the unexpected question. He had thought this would be something far more serious given Crumb's secretive behavior, maybe something about the tournament or a dark plot he had discovered. The reality was so ordinary in comparison that Charles struggled to adjust. Nothing, he said, his voice bewildered. We're just friends. Ginny's my girlfriend. Hermione's not my girlfriend, and she never has been. It's just that Skeeter woman making things up. Crumb's scowl deepened, the shadows making him look even more intimidating. Hermione talks about you a lot, he said, eyeing Charles suspiciously, trying to catch any hint of a lie. Yeah, Charles replied, trying to stay calm under Crumb's intense stare. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he had picked up from his father. Because we're friends. Ron and I are her closest friends. We've been through a lot together, you know. As the conversation continued, Charles found himself in the strange position of reassuring Victor Crumb, an international Quidditch star, about his platonic relationship with Hermione. It was a bizarre turn of events, and Charles felt both flattered and overwhelmed. Here he was, standing in the Forbidden Forest, explaining his friendships to a world-famous athlete worried about romantic rivalry. Crumb listened closely, his expression slowly softening as Charles spoke. The tension in his shoulders eased, and a look of relief crossed his face. It was clear that Crumb had been genuinely worried about Charles and Hermione, and Charles's honest words were helping calm his fears. As the awkwardness started to fade, Crumb's attitude shifted. He began to compliment Charles on his flying skills, particularly praising his performance in the first task. Charles, eager to move away from the uncomfortable topic of Hermione, enthusiastically brought up Crumb's famous Wronski feint, asking the older champion questions about the challenging move. Just as their conversation was becoming more relaxed, with both boys bonding over their shared love of Quidditch, a sudden movement in the trees behind Crumb caught Charles's attention. Years of adventures at Hogwarts had sharpened Charles's instincts, making him alert to any potential danger. Without hesitation, Charles grabbed Crumb's arm and pulled him around, positioning himself slightly in front of the older boy. His eyes scanned the darkness, searching for the source of the movement. What is it? Crumb asked, his hand moving to his wand. Charles shook his head, his eyes fixed on where he had seen the movement. His hand slipped inside his robes, fingers wrapping around his own wand. Suddenly, a figure stumbled out from behind a tall oak tree. For a moment, Charles didn't recognize him. The dim light and the man's disheveled appearance made it hard to tell who it was. Then, with a jolt of surprise, he realized it was Mr. Crouch. The man before them was far from the well-groomed ministry official they had last seen judging the Triwizard Tournament. Crouch looked terrible. His once neat robes were torn and bloody, hanging off him in tatters. His face was covered in scratches and cuts, and stubble darkened his usually clean-shaven chin. But his behavior was the most alarming. He was muttering and gesturing wildly, as if talking to someone only he could see, his eyes unfocused and darting around. If Harry had been there, he would have immediately recognized this as the real Barty Crouch Sr., not the imposter who had been pretending to be him since the start of the tournament. Somehow, against all odds, Crouch had escaped from wherever his son had kept him. He had broken free from Voldemort and Wormtail, driven by a desperate need that gave him the strength to escape the powerful magic holding him. Wasn't he a judge? Crumb whispered, his eyes wide. Isn't he with your ministry? Charles nodded, his mind racing to understand what was happening. Slowly, he approached Crouch, who was still mumbling to himself, unaware of the boy's presence. Mr. Crouch! Charles called, his voice a little shaky. Are you okay? Crouch's unfocused eyes snapped to Charles, a spark of recognition appearing in them. For a moment, he seemed aware, but then the desperation and fear quickly took over. Dumbledore! He gasped, lurching forward and grabbing Charles's robes with surprising strength. His fingers dug into the fabric, clinging to Charles like a lifeline. I need, see. Dumbledore! What followed was a terrifying exchange, with Crouch shifting between moments of clarity and complete confusion. His ramblings were a mix of ministry secrets, personal guilt, and dark warnings. Names and events spilled from his mouth in a chaotic stream, each more alarming than the last. I've done, stupid, thing. Crouch panted, his grip on Charles almost painful. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his eyes darted around, as if expecting danger at any moment. Must tell Dumbledore. As Charles tried to make sense of Crouch's disjointed words, he realized just how serious this situation was. Crouch mentioned Bertha Hawkins, a ministry witch who had gone missing months ago, which sent a chill down his spine. His talk about his son, who was supposed to be dead, raised even more questions. But it was his repeated mentions of the Dark Lord that truly terrified Charles. He had overheard his father discussing similar things in hushed tones with his mother, conversations that stopped abruptly whenever he walked into the room. It was clear that something big was happening. I'll get Dumbledore if you let me go, Mr. Crouch. Charles insisted, trying to pull free from the man's grip. The situation was spiraling out of control, and they needed help, someone who could understand Crouch's ramblings and provide the help he clearly needed. Charles looked at Crumb for help, but the older boy stood back, clearly unnerved by what was happening. The usually confident and composed Quidditch star looked lost and uncertain. Finally breaking free from Crouch's grasp, Charles made a quick decision. The seriousness of the situation called for immediate action, and he knew he had to take it. You stay here with him, he told Crumb, his voice taking on a commanding tone that surprised even himself. I'll get Dumbledore. I'll be faster, I know where his office is. Without waiting for an answer, Charles turned and ran away from the forest, his feet pounding against the dark grounds of Hogwarts. His mind was racing with thoughts and fears. He knew he had to find help fast. Dumbledore was his first choice, but Moody or even his brother Harry would do. Someone who could understand Crouch's warnings and stop whatever dark plan was in motion. Dash. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, in an old, run-down house far from Hogwarts, another scene was playing out. Peter Pettigrew, his watery eyes darting nervously, approached the high-backed chair where his master sat. The room was dim, shadows flickering on the walls as if they were trying to escape the evil presence filling the space. My lord, Pettigrew squeaked, his voice shaking as he approached the chair. He fell to his knees, bowing his head. I have bad news. Barty Crouch Sr. has escaped. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. A cold, high-pitched voice hissed in anger, the sound sending chills through Pettigrew. What? Crucio. The spell hit Pettigrew like a physical blow. He collapsed to the floor, his body twisting in agony as if white-hot knives were piercing every inch of his skin. His screams echoed through the empty house, a sound that would have terrified anyone who heard it. As Pettigrew's screams faded, leaving him twitching and whimpering on the floor, the voice spoke again. Each word was filled with anger, promising more pain if the answers weren't satisfactory. How? Pettigrew, still shaking from the Cruciatus curse, struggled to his knees. His face was pale with fear, sweat dripping from his forehead as he tried to speak through the pain. I don't know, my lord, he managed to say. I checked his cell, as I do every hour, and he was gone. I don't know how he broke free from Barty's Imperius. It was like he just vanished. Another wave of anger came from the chair, and with it, another Cruciatus curse. Pettigrew's screams filled the room again, his body thrashing as if trying to escape the invisible pain. It seemed to last forever, though it was only a few seconds before it stopped. When silence fell again, broken only by Pettigrew's ragged breathing and quiet sobs, the voice of Lord Voldemort spoke once more. The raw anger had been replaced by cold calculation, each word measured and deliberate. This complicates things, Wormtail. Our plans are hanging by a thread, and now that thread is fraying. There was a pause, filled with dark contemplation. We must act fast. Warn Barty immediately. Use the emergency signal, he will understand. Pettigrew nodded quickly, grateful for the clear instructions and the break from pain. But Voldemort wasn't done. Get ready to travel, Wormtail. We're leaving for Hogsmeade immediately. If we're lucky, we may catch Crouch before he reaches Hogwarts. Pettigrew, still shaking from the curse, dared to ask a question that had been bothering him since learning about Crouch's escape. "Is it safe, my lord?" he whispered. "Dumbledore is there, and Hadrian Potter. I can't match them, even with your help. We risk being caught." The answer was chilling in its determination, a reminder of why Lord Voldemort was the most feared dark wizard in a century. "Barty is essential to my plans for resurrection, Wormtail. Without him in his position at Hogwarts, I will be stuck in this pitiful form far longer than I intend, a fate I refuse to accept." There was a rustle of movement from the chair, as if its occupant leaned forward. "We will be careful. We will watch from a distance. We will only show ourselves if it's safe. At worst, we may have to abandon this plan and retreat. I can wait longer if I must, though I won't be pleased." As Pettigrew hurried to follow orders, Voldemort's red eyes gleamed in the firelight. The carefully laid plans were falling apart, but in this chaos, he saw an opportunity. The game was changing, the pieces were moving in unexpected ways, but he was determined to win. Chapter 260, A Frantic Chase. The old stone walls of Hogwarts echoed with the hurried footsteps of Charles Potter as he sprinted through the entrance hall, his heart pounding. The urgency of his mission pushed him forward, his mind racing from the strange encounter he'd just had in the Forbidden Forest. As he turned a corner at full speed, he almost crashed into Professor Alastor Mad-Eye Moody. "Charles!" Moody shouted, his normal eye widening in surprise while his magical eye swiveled around, taking in Charles's disheveled appearance and panicked expression. "What's got you running like that, lad? You look like you've seen a ghost and not one of the friendly ones." Gasping for breath, Charles struggled to explain. The words tumbled out quickly, his voice shaking with both exertion and fear. "Professor! It's Mr. Crouch, he's in the forest, something's wrong, we need Dumbledore." Moody's face grew serious as Charles described what had happened with the delirious Barty Crouch Sr. His magical eye spun faster with each detail, as if searching for unseen dangers hidden in the castle walls. "Dumbledore's away on urgent ministry business," Moody growled, his voice tense, clearly frustrated at the headmaster's absence at such an important time. "But this can't wait. Not with everything that's been happening. Show me where you left him, Charles. Now." Without hesitation, they set off toward the Forbidden Forest at a brisk pace, Moody's wooden leg thumping steadily in rhythm with Charles's hurried steps. The night air felt thick with tension as they approached the spot where Charles had left Krum and Crouch, the dark forest closing in around them. When they reached the clearing, they were met with an unexpected shock. Instead of finding Crouch and Krum, they found only the unconscious body of Victor Krum lying on the forest floor. There was no sign of Crouch, he had disappeared as if he had never been there. "Bloody hell," Moody muttered, his magical eye spinning rapidly as he looked around. "This is worse than I thought. Charles, I need you to do something for me, quickly. Summon your broom, that firebolt of yours. I'll need its speed for what comes next." Though confused by the request, Charles didn't hesitate. He raised his wand and called out, "Oxio Firebolt!" His voice echoed through the forest, and moments later, his sleek racing broom zoomed into view, coming to a stop beside them. Moody grabbed the firebolt, his gnarled hands gripping the polished handle tightly. "Good lad. Now, I need you to take Krum to Madame Pomfrey. Make sure he's looked after properly. I'll track down Crouch, whatever's going on here, it's not good, and we can't let him slip away." Charles opened his mouth to argue, to insist on helping, but Moody cut him off with a stern look. "No arguments, Potter. This is beyond you now. Get Krum to safety and alert the other staff. That's how you can help best." Reluctantly, Charles nodded and used his wand to levitate Krum. As he began making his way back to the castle, he glanced back and saw Moody mounting the firebolt, his magical eye already scanning the forest as he took off. Dash. Rewind the clock by a few minutes, and we find ourselves back in the depths of the Forbidden Forest. Victor Krum stood guard over the mumbling form of Barty Crouch Sr., growing more uneasy with every passing moment. The shadows around them seemed to deepen, the usual sounds of the forest muted as if nature itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby, the sound sharp in the eerie quiet. Krum turned quickly, his wand at the ready, his reflexes honed by years of Quidditch training. To his shock, he found himself staring at another Barty Crouch Sr., a perfect duplicate of the man lying at his feet. "Who are you?" Krum demanded, his accent thick with tension, his wand aimed directly at the newcomer. "Why do you look like him? What's going on here?" The second Crouch raised his hands in a calming gesture, his voice calm and confident. I am the real Barty Crouch Sr., Mr. Crumb. I'm here on official ministry business, though I can't say more than that. The man you've been guarding is, let's call him an experiment from the Department of Mysteries who escaped. Lower your wand, lad, and let me take care of this situation. Crumb hesitated, torn between his instincts and the desire for a simple explanation. Just then, the Crouch on the ground, who had been mumbling incoherently, suddenly snapped to attention at the sound of the other's voice. His eyes, previously vacant, sharpened with a mix of recognition and anger. With a snarl, the prone Crouch tried to grab a wand that wasn't there, his hands grasping at nothing. Realizing he was unarmed and outnumbered, he made a split-second decision. In a burst of energy, he scrambled to his feet and ran into the forest, hoping to lose his pursuers in the darkness. Crumb, caught off guard, turned his attention to the fleeing man. In that instant, the second Crouch, who was actually Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise, seized his chance. With lightning-fast reflexes, he sent a stunning spell flying at Crumb. The red light hit Crumb square in the back, and the Dumstrang Seeker fell to the ground without a sound. Crouch Jr. wasted no time, immediately casting another stunning spell at his fleeing father. The spell found its mark, and the elder Crouch collapsed mid-stride, unconscious before he hit the ground. Standing alone in the clearing, Crouch Jr. surveyed the scene, his mind racing. He had narrowly averted disaster. If his father had escaped, it could have ruined everything. Now, he needed to act quickly to control the situation and salvage their plan. He turned his attention to Crumb. The Dumstrang champion was a complication, but killing him would attract too much attention. Crumb's fame meant his disappearance would lead to a major investigation, potentially ruining the entire tournament. With a grimace, Crouch Jr. pointed his wand at Crumb. Obliviate, he muttered, carefully altering the young man's memories. He erased any recollection of seeing two Crouch seniors, replacing it with a vague memory of being attacked by an unseen figure while guarding a confused ministry official. With that done, Crouch Jr. turned back to his father. Time was running out. He needed to get beyond the Hogwarts wards so he could contact his master and arrange for his father's capture once more. Casting a disillusionment charm over his father's unconscious body, Crouch Jr. began moving through the forest, always alert for any signs of pursuit. His progress was slow, weighed down by the need for stealth and the unconscious form he was carrying. As he neared the edge of the Hogwarts wards, he heard a sound from above, the unmistakable whoosh of a broomstick slicing through the night air. Someone was chasing him, and they were moving much faster than he could on foot. Acting quickly, Crouch Jr. hid his father in a dense thicket, covering him with an invisibility cloak. Then, taking a deep breath, he stepped into a small clearing to face whoever was coming. He could only hope his disguise would hold up under scrutiny and that he had the skills to deal with this new threat.
Thanks for listening.